What's up, everyone? Welcome to Normal Merrick Show, host Rob Noor. Look at this, we got some jokesters. We got some jokesters in the chat this evening. Who's the Chad that I got to call on? Your mom, Funicon. That's who the Chad is. Hope you're all having a great day. I am. Well, I'm having a day. It's good. It's a pretty good day. So we'll do a call-in show tonight, talk about whatever people want. I thought about just doing what's the guy's name? Robinson? The dude from North Carolina, running for governor as a Republican. So that news broke that allegedly he was on like this pornographic site and he was saying like all this salacious stuff. And I thought about just doing a dramatic reading of those. Pretty funny, pretty good stuff. We can talk about that, whatever people want, but it's been a good day. Yeah, hit the like button. Thanks, John Rock. Always looking out for me. Conservative Carnage, hope you're feeling better, man. What's up, David Atlas? Hello. Hello, Bravo. Hello, Achilles. Everyone else. Thank you so much. My little man is staying with his grandma and grandpa tonight, so me and the wife have the night off. So she's currently working on her sewing machine in the room next to me. She could hear me. You probably can't hear her. Are you listening to me, Courtney?
Well, I hear you here.
But what are you playing? You playing a video or something over there?
Am I playing something?
Yeah, I hear some sort of audio over there.
Oh, sorry.
No, I don't mind. Is it me?
No, God, no.
Oh.
I don't need to hear you twice.
That's what I wondered. I was like, I could just talk louder.
Please don't.
Okay.
Dor's in here with you. I think I have Belle.
Okay. The dogs have separated. Never mind. Dorothy's running over to you now. Yeah, so after this, maybe we'll watch a movie that's not animated. Would that be nice? To be honest, I said maybe we could watch a non-animated movie tonight.
Shutting my door.
She shut the door. She got tired of hearing me. She hears me all day. She doesn't need to hear me. Got you on Prime Gaming time. Shouldn't you be fishing, Chrysco? Destiny Defeater. Thank you. I try. But no, it's a good evening. So good night for a call-in show. So let me put that link out there. We'll talk about whatever people want. So all you need is a Discord account. You can call in. Now, as always, I prefer people that disagree with me. But who in the hell sensibly would disagree with me? So we'll take any type of call, any subject that you want, within reason, as long as it's within terms of service or I find it remotely interesting. But I do have news. So I finally got to look at my back, my MRI. And it's not the greatest of news. I definitely have 2 herniated discs, as I assumed. Now, I obviously am not qualified to read an MRI, but I did go to went to the chiropractor today, and he looked at it. And then I go to an orthopedic specialist tomorrow, and they will look at it. And we'll see what direction I go from here. But the explanation I got was it's not the worst herniated disc they'd ever seen, but it is not mild. It is beyond moderate. So I thought, you remember, wasn't there this guy, I don't follow a lot of the streamer drama, but wasn't there this guy named Boogie that basically told everyone for years that he had like some sort of illness, cancer or something, and then a bunch of people like called him out after like a while. Thank you so much, Lavin. Thanks for the subscription. And it was like, show us your medical records. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. How do you all know that I'm not just faking an injury? It was a work-related injury. I'm not going to talk about the specifics, but maybe I'm just faking this for sympathy. I'm faking the whole thing. Really, my back is strong as an ox, and I'm just pretending. So I was like, how can I convince my fantastic audience? So I thought, what the hell? I'll show you a picture of my back. So who's down for that? Who's down to look at an MRI to start the show? Hurrah! Yeah, let's do it. Let's look at an MRI. Now, I don't know shit. Like I said, I see the specialist tomorrow, so the specialist might look at this and say, "Yeah, it doesn't look that bad. You sound like a real sissy." Maybe that's what'll come about of this. Or maybe they'll say, "Oh my God, that's the worst MRI I've ever seen." I don't know. I think it's probably somewhere in between those two. So let's do it, man. This is why you tune into me. The exciting stuff. Super chat. $5. Do 10 jumping jacks. Pass. But thanks for your $5. Here we go. You ready? Drum roll, please. There it is. There's my MRI. Now, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but can anyone see the problem? I'm not trained to look at an MRI, but I was able to quickly identify the problem area. I mean, one, because that's where it hurts, but I think even someone who doesn't really know what's going on could see there's a slight issue. Just looks like me. That's just me. So you can see right at the curvature there. So you see the top disc, second, third, fourth, fifth. They're all good. That sixth and seventh one that you see in the picture there, the way it was explained to me is the way they're puffing out there into that white, into the back there. That white line is your spinal cord. And so you see how it's sort of pinching out there. It's sort of ballooned out. That's what's causing me problems. Now, like I said, I don't know that. The chiropractor I saw today said, "Well, it's severe. It's not the worst he's ever seen, but it's not a small deal. It's pretty bad." So I don't know what that means. I'm going to try to avoid surgery at all costs. So I'll see the specialist tomorrow, and hopefully we come up with a game plan to how to attack it without using pain medication or surgery is my plan. So the only thing I take's a leave, really. But that's the plan. But it really hurts like hell. And then, unfortunately, not only does it hurt, but if I start walking, what'll happen will be, because I have that pain in my lower back, I'll just start subconsciously, like if this is me walking straight up, I'll just start, as I'm moving around more and more in the day, to alleviate that pain, like subconsciously, I start to like do this. And by the end of the day, I'm like walking around hutched over and I don't even realize it. And then I sleep pretty good. It's like not keeping me up at night or anything like that. But when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, yeah, I feel pretty good. My back doesn't hurt that bad. And then as the day goes on, it's always, my leg starts hurting, my back starts hurting more and more and more and more. So yeah, that's it. There's those old herniated rub. Josh, yeah. Upside down compression. I've thought of that. They got this, like the chiropractor's got like a traction machine that like is designed to pull your spine. So that's an option. And then I've looked into, like, I used to do the DDP yoga. They have one specifically designed for back injuries. But before I start doing exercises and stuff, I want to talk to the specialist and then kind of get an idea, because what I don't want to do is like gung-ho jump into something that's making the problem worse. So that's the plan. Try to get over this, and it's like, again, I don't want people to get the wrong impression. It's not like I'm in so much pain that I'm like chronically miserable. It's not that. It's that anything I do that's like just random stuff that you take for granted in your everyday life, like bending over to pick something up, it hurts like hell. Just walking around, it hurts like hell. You twist weird in your sleep, it hurts like hell. And my big concern is, I have a 3-year-old. He's going to be playing baseball and stuff in a year or two. What am I going to do? I can't throw a ball. I can't swing a bat or anything like that. So I really want to get this, taken care of to the best of my ability. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But that's where I'm at health-wise. Other than that, everything pretty good. I've been losing weight. Yeah, I know about the ring dinger. The chiropractor's done that. Hasn't done much for me. So we've done that. But now that we have an MRI, I question why they didn't order an MRI for me 5 months ago when I first went to the doctor. They had me go see a chiropractor, or an x-ray, but that was it. And the x-ray basically showed nothing, and they're like, well, you probably have a herniated disc. And then I did physical therapy for 3 months, and what's my weight right now? I think 260, right around 260. My target weight, I would like to weigh 200 pounds. I think that would be fine for me. So that's the plan. But I am going to try to do it. I really want to avoid surgery, and I really want to avoid any sort of pain medication, because I know I'm like a shitbird that could be addicted to things. So I don't even want to broach that subject. It's one thing I never got into. Plenty of friends that went down the painkiller route, so I'm not trying to be in that boat. So we'll stick with the Aleve. But that's it. So there you go. There's big talk of my back. So, all right. So we'll take call-in tonight if people want. If not, we'll just do a normal show. Certainly would love to debate some lefties tonight. It would be fun. Nothing better therapy-wise for a bad back than smacking around some lefties. We'll see. I'm drinking my water like an idiot. I missed the whole part of it. So yeah, we have this story of what's his first name? Mark Robinson, is that his name? This guy from North Carolina. We have this story. One of the things, here's something I'll do real quick. I just noticed this. One of the things you got to applaud some of these left-wing people for, they stay on message. Like, they just consistently, it doesn't matter what the topic is. Watch how Pisco does this. Kim Iverson, I think she's debating Destiny right now. You're a disgrace. Trump tried to steal the 2020 election. You're floundering. You should be ashamed. Real patriotic Americans never forgive people like you. This is the same guy when it turned out that the FBI was using Russian disinformation to spy on Trump's campaign, said, it was unfortunate. Benny Johnson's they're talking in Springfield, Ohio right now. Pisco, any comment on Mark Robinson coming out as a black Nazi who loves transgender porn and Hitler? And that's the left in a nutshell. They're very good at that. They're very good at controlling the narrative. It's why they become very irate with someone like me. They'll scream, what aboutism? They have to talk about what they want to talk about constantly. They can't defend Harris's record. They can't defend Biden's record. You saw it on the panel the other night. They're unable to defend it. One of the things that was funny was I saw a bunch of comments because a bunch of lefties commented on that panel debate I did the other night. And one of the big comments I was getting was when the only policy that they were able to talk about really that Kamala Harris discussed was she's going to build 3 million homes. She's going to build 3 million homes. And the obvious answer to that is like, okay, well, her administration right now promised that they were going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on electric vehicle charging stations. They've built 7. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars for a program to hook people up in rural America to broadband. They've barely hooked up anyone. And so it's easy for them to say, what's your policy? My policy is to spend billions of dollars giving people stuff, building stuff for people. It's like, okay, but you say that over and over again, and then you spend the money, and then nothing gets built. Yeah, Toke, it is why I took a different tone. I wanted to illustrate what Trump should have done to stay on message, which is exactly what I tried to do in that panel debate. It's very hard in a panel debate to do that, by the way. Rob GPT, damn right. So, one of the criticisms I got was there were a bunch of people I saw commenting like, that's not true. I live in rural America and I've got hooked up to broadband and I know tons of other people that have got hooked up to broadband. That's what I was hearing. That's what people were saying. Rob's lying. He's lying. So let me explain. Yes. Have people in the past 4 years been hooked up to rural broadband? Absolutely. Was it from the Harris-Biden program? No. That'd be like if, let's say Kamala Harris wins and she spends $1 billion to build these 3 million houses, but it never builds one, but your neighbor built a house. Then you go, see, her plan worked. My neighbor built a house. Yeah, but it had nothing to do with that program. Nonetheless, you're misleading people. Houses were built. Yes, independent people build houses. Yes, it's true. There were people that were hooked up to broadband. There is no evidence that I'm aware of that the Kamala Harris-Joe Biden plan led to any of that. Quite to the contrary. Now, I'm open to seeing new evidence. It's not a hill I'm willing to, stake my life on. But I didn't just pull this out of my ass. Let me see. I thought I bookmarked this. This is the FCC commissioner testifying today. I believe he mentions this. We'll up the speed a little. So his playback speed's at 1.25, so don't think he's a motor mouth like me.
On the FCC for over 7 years now. Before that, I served as the agency's general counsel after first joining the FCC as a staffer back in 2012. My primary focus has been ensuring that every American has a fair shot at next-generation connectivity. In my view, there's no better way to do a job in Washington than to get outside the Beltway and see firsthand the challenges ahead. That's why I spent time in nearly every state over the past few years, meeting with broadband builders, local leaders, and community members alike. Along the way, I've stood on top of a 2,000-foot broadcast tower with tower crews. I've been a mile below ground to see a fiber build connecting an underground research lab. I've visited with crews stringing fiber along the Arctic Ocean in Utqiagvik, Alaska, America's northernmost point. And I've been on the Gulf Coast with teams as they restored service after hurricanes in Florida. In every community, I've heard about the opportunity that comes with a high-speed connection. And that's why I was pleased when a bipartisan consensus emerged to provide the support necessary to end the digital divide. The most significant of those efforts is a $42 billion initiative known as BEAD. But unfortunately, BEAD is a program that has gone off the rails. Here's how. In 2021, Vice President Harris agreed to lead the administration's signature $42 billion effort to extend internet service to millions of Americans. It's now been 1,039 days since that program was enacted. After all of that time, not one person has been connected to the internet. Not one home, not one business.
Wait a minute. I got fact-checked by all the lefties. They are right. I was incorrect. I said that they spent hundreds of millions and connected less than 100 people. Full admission, I'm wrong. They spent $47 billion and connected 0. My mistake. Undersold it on both grounds. Now, this is the type of things that the fact checkers will do. You debate some lefty makes some claim, and all of their audience, like little clapping seals, that's not true. My neighbor got broadband and he used to not to, so Rob's lying. Only this program didn't connect anyone. Now I ask you again, if the extent of the policies that people could say, these are good policies that Kamala Harris are talking about in the debate, where, she said she'd build 3 million homes. Why should we trust an administration that spent $47 billion to connect people to broadband internet and haven't connected one? If you hired a contractor to build you a garage, and he said, yeah, it's going to cost $10,000. And you said, okay. And you give him $10,000. He says it'll take 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, nothing's done. He says, give me another $10,000. You say, okay. 2 weeks later, nothing's done. And he does that 10 times in a row. And then you're like, dude, I've given you 20 weeks and $100,000 and there's nothing. And he said, I tell you what I'm going to do, though. I promise you that I'm going to build you a new deck around your house. That's what I'm going to do for you. Would you trust him? Are you saying, oh, okay, sounds great. Oh, boy, I'd love a new deck. That sounds wonderful. Or would you say, we gave you all this money and you've done nothing. So why would I believe you when you're like, well, the real selling point to me is I'm going to build a bunch more stuff. Oh, that's right, specific mice. Absolutely, the people that are laundering money, stuff got done for them. You bet your bottom dollar it did. You remember when I debated Destiny way back in like 2022 on the Biden record versus the Trump record? I was debating a lot of people. Him, I think I remember specifically. There were other people. And when we kept talking about like what has the Biden administration done, one of the things they kept talking about was infrastructure. They just passed this infrastructure bill. And I said, so how could you call that a positive? You don't know what the results of that bill will be. Anyone could do that. You could elect me president and I could be like, all right, I'm going to ram through a $100 trillion bill that's going to build everyone a new house in the country. And then if it got passed, you'd say, great job. This guy nailed it. He did it. Everyone a new house. What a great victory for Rob. How do you know? Maybe no houses ever get built. We're celebrating them spending money saying, trust us, this will fix shit. Do you understand the stupidity of this? Like, how is that a victory? Oh, we spent $47 billion. And listen, I'm telling you, the rural broadband thing, when I ran for Congress in 2019, this was actually here in rural Pennsylvania, was a significant issue. People are really, particularly, it's not just homes. You might think it's homes, but the particular interest was attracting businesses to the area. Because to compete now, even as a small business, you need access to broadband. You basically do, or you're at a huge disadvantage unless you're in a very niche market of like what your small business would be. But even the most niche of markets need advertising, visibility, and broadband is almost necessary for any of that. So it is popular around these parts to have a president, regardless Republican or Democrat, say, hey, we're going to spend a bunch of money to make sure you people get cheap, affordable rural broadband. Because you have to understand, where I live, like 3 minutes from where I'm at, I don't get cell phone service. Internet's very I'm okay here. Since I've moved into this house, we've had options for sort of broadband, but many places didn't. In fact, my brother-in-law's place that they just purchased, they can't get broadband. They had to get Starlink. So before Elon Musk, that home would have been like, I don't know if they had they just bought the house, so I don't know if the people before them had dial-up or no internet. And that's not 15 minutes away from me. So it's popular to say, hey, we passed a new bill to make sure you guys get broadband. Great. And no one gets hooked up to it. But it was popular. It was very popular. So I just thought that was funny that was one of the pushbacks. Yeah, it might be DSL was maybe an option for them. I'm not sure. But they always do this stuff, right? Where it's like, oh, we're going to spend all this money on infrastructure and all. And you could be like, yeah, the roads are falling apart here. I guess that wouldn't be a bad idea. A bridge in Pittsburgh collapsed a few years ago. Yeah, maybe we do need some spending on infrastructure. And then every time the new budget comes up, they're like, look, the bridges are falling apart. The roads are falling apart. We need money, the power grid. We need more money from infrastructure. And it's like, I don't have the best memory, but didn't we just spend hundreds of billions of dollars on infrastructure a year or two ago? Where did that money go? I didn't see it. I'm sure it's spent somewhere in some place. Not all of it's being stolen, but it didn't really accomplish the things that we were sold. Like, oh, it's going to fix all these roads. Well, not really. I hardly see any change. But those are the sorts of things that we're told, why is a Biden-Harris administration good? Oh, they had all this cooperation and all these legislative achievements they got passed. They spent a shitload of money, but don't blame them for inflation. But they spent a shitload of money. Okay. And has your life gotten marginally better? Economically, have things been better for you? Most Americans say no. As I said, this election will come down to people that think they were better off under the policies of Donald Trump than Kamala Harris versus people that think that Trump is a shithead. He's a threat to democracy. He's a threat to women's rights. He's a terrible, loathsome person. He's annoying. That's what the debate will be in people's minds. Those that haven't already made up their mind. And unfortunately, and then there's shenanigans that will occur. But unfortunately, a lot of that relies on winning the debate. And when you control the narrative, it makes it that much easier. So I was reading today, since Kamala Harris has become the de facto candidate, I believe her and Tim Walz have done 7 interviews, 3 for Harris, 4 for Walz. In that same period of time, just on the national networks, Vance and Trump have did 77 or 75, basically 10 times more. And that's not counting when they're going on like sycophantic, like, Fox News or something like that. Trump's sitting down with Theo Vaughn. He's talking to golfers. He's doing town halls. He's going into places that he knows are hostile, just like J.D. Vance are. Like the, the Black Business Council or whatever. He went to it. He goes in front of Dana Bash. That's why you see them stay on message. But January 6th, you're a traitor. Again, none of these people gave a shit when the FBI was using Russian disinformation to illegally spy on Trump, going after him for 4 years, leaking to the press going after him the entire time, the Democrats going on national television and lying, like Adam Kissinger and Eric Swalwell. We've seen the proof. We've seen the proof that Trump's illegally colluded with Russia. They didn't give a shit. They didn't care about any of that. Not at all. Not one bit. But January 6th, that's it. Most serious thing ever. Everyone's a traitor. You're a traitor if you vote for Donald Trump. Trump's rhetoric's so bad, he'll lead to someone getting hurt. What's that? The assassination attempts are against Trump? Well, that's Trump's rhetoric's fault, not ours. He is a threat to democracy. You going downstairs? Okay.
Just have to grab something.
Is it working? Did you get it?
I did.
Nice. Yeah, the sewing machine we got for my wife, it was missing a part, and so we ordered it, and she says it's working now, so that's good. I remind you, by the way, if anyone wants to call in and discuss anything, there's the Discord link. Whether you want to argue against me or just agree with me or ask a question, anything of that nature. What's up, Sparky? Thanks so much for the cheer. That was the boss. That was my wife. Now, we talked about yesterday. I don't know anyone. Maybe my editor, Black Elk, could clip this. 33 minutes in, Black Elk. You can clip this. Yesterday, we talked about Iran and their influence operation where they have hacked or illegally got material of the Trump campaign and then gave it to the Biden campaign. The entire hubbub resulting in Crossfire Hurricane was the allegation that Russians were going to give material and illegally collude with Donald Trump. Now, we are told that they're the ones that gave the information to WikiLeaks, which seems like garbage for reasons we could get into. But there was never a direct giving of information from Russians to Trump's team. We have that with Iran. They gave that to the Biden team, which became the Harris team. So FISA warrants? Right? Isn't that the standard that's been set? Time to give FISA warrants to spy on the Biden team, right? That's the standard, correct? Trump was incredibly hostile to Russia, despite some of the things he said about them. Sanctioning oil wells, increasing domestic production. unlike Obama, selling weapons to Ukraine to defend against Russia. What's the Biden team done with Iran? Resent them money that Trump's team stopped them from getting. Had their envoy to Iran basically get his security clearance revoked for mishandling classified information and possibly allegedly giving it to Iran. That guy appointing people that were later said to be working for Tehran. Then the Biden administration covering up and not cooperating with the IG is about why this guy who had his security clearance revoked was still allowed to basically have access to material that he shouldn't have had access to. FISA warrants, anyone? Why is it that all of the people that were so vocal about Tim Pool and Lauren Southern and Tenet Media getting money from Russians and all this foreign influence, my goodness, why are they all so silent? I haven't seen one of them comment. Not one. They had so much to say about Tenet Media. They said, if Russia's supporting your candidate, oh my goodness, they're a hostile foreign power. You really need to think about it. Okay, Iran's clearly supporting Biden-Harris. Many of the people on the left that I talk to get paid through Democratic groups. Are we sure none of that movie came from Iran? We sure? Because you'd look like an awful damn hypocrite and fool if you pointed your finger and said, Tenet Media, they should have known where the money was coming from. Maybe so. Do you know where your money's coming from? Of course, maybe you're in a position like me and the only money he gets from subscription and super chat, so it's a little different. I haven't taken money from anyone other than that. I must be getting some of that Tim Pool Russian money. Yeah, sure. It must be. You got it, Chad, yeah. Wasn't the standard set forth to have FISA warrants? Isn't that the standard? To charge people for crimes that have nothing to do with the allegation, to go back nearly a decade and look at all sorts of other crimes, to tip off media outlets that are happy to be there. So when you drag out people you're alleging of crimes in their underwear in the middle of the night, the news cameras are there, like they did to Roger Stone when CNN was there. Isn't that the standard? All the people that are screaming "my democracy" didn't give a shit about all of that obvious corruption from the FBI. Did not care. They made excuses. They said it's not that big of a deal. Oh, well, there were mistakes made, but it was incompetence. They didn't know you weren't supposed to change evidence to say the opposite of the truth when you were getting FISA warrants to spy on a presidential candidate's team. They didn't know. They just didn't know. The top brass at the FBI didn't know that. What every fourth grader that's ever watched an episode of Law and Order knows. But yet, still they are screaming, "My democracy! My democracy!" Yeah, Hasbar, that's what we're talking about, man. Hey, nope. You're going to rip some wires out, girl. What are you doing? Hey, buddy. Scritches. My old dog, Annabelle. She's got cancer. She's not in pain, but there's nothing they could do for her, so we're just making her life as comfortable. So come on, you want to come say hi to people? Come here. She might not want to jump up. Come on. Can you get up? Come on. No, she doesn't want to come up. Dorothy will. Come on, Dorothy. There's Dorothy. Oh, Dorothy. Dorothy. I never have my dogs up here when I'm streaming, but I don't mind. Dorothy. They're good dogs. Oh. What are you doing, Annabelle? Now, stand in the closet. So it's like a new room to them. They've been in here, but it's newer. They don't see it a lot, so they're always creeping around. And sometimes they'll like rip the internet out of the wall and stuff like that. So, so yeah, that's the Iran. By the way, I said this yesterday as well, but it's worth repeating. Remember, Even if a would-be assassin donates to Act Blue 19 times and has Biden-Harris stickers on their vehicle and is clearly shooting at Trump and has no love for Trump, if he says on a social media post, I supported Trump in 2016, then according to people like Destiny, he's a Republican. Even though we know he voted in the 2024 Democratic primary. None of that matters. He said he supported Trump once, so he's a Republican. That's how we have to take people at their word, right? Okay, Vladimir Putin says he's supporting Harris. So now we have Iran supporting Harris. Putin saying he's supporting Harris. So tell me again about our enemies. Of course, another thing that we talked about in that panel debate, it's obvious to anyone who's remotely paying attention, sorry, is the fact that the Harris-Biden administration claimed that the border was secure for 3 years and covered up how much of a crisis it was. Not only were they saying it was secure, there were some problems, but it was secure, but they were constantly saying that it was racist or it was being blown out of proportion by their opposition that talked about it. So today we had an official that was there until 2022, Mr. Heike, and he's going to explain to you in this nice little 30-second clip that we've packaged down what was going on at the border.
We had an exponential increase in significant interest aliens. These are aliens with significant ties to terrorism. Prior to this administration, the San Diego sector averaged 10 to 15 SIA arrests per year. Once word was out the border was far easier to cross, San Diego went to over 100 SIAs in 2022, well over that in 2023, and even more than that registered this year. These are only the ones we caught. At the time, I was told I could not release any information on this increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests. The administration was trying to convince the public there was no threat at the border.
Huh. That can't be. I was assured by the likes of Hutch, and I'm really important in Pisco. No, they took the border seriously. It's Trump's fault. It's Trump's fault that the border's not secure. We talked to Mark Robinson a little. I'll talk about it here in a bit more. It's all Trump's fault. All right, we got some callers on the hook. Mark Robinson, I'll talk about it briefly. So, Mark Robinson is this dude. He's running for governor as a Republican. I think today's like the last day to drop out, or you can't change it. It's being alleged that he had a bunch of posts on a pornographic website saying things such as he's actually a Nazi and he thinks that we should still have slaves, and then a litany of sexually explicit conversations about cheating on his wife with the sister, and it's actually downright hilarious. Some of these, I'm not going to read them on stream. It's too vulgar, but my goodness, it's like perverted poetry. It's fantastic. He claims it wasn't him. He's going with the old Joy Reid defense. No, I'll contact the FBI. Someone hacked my material even way back then. Could be. It was good enough for Joy Reid, so the Democrats that were okay with that should have nothing to say. If I was in North Carolina and I had a decision to vote for him or not, I would say, do I think these are things that are sincere? I would not vote for an actual Nazi. I would not vote for a person who actually wanted slaves. I wouldn't. I still wouldn't vote Democrat, but I wouldn't vote for that person. Would I vote for a person that had sexually explicit conversations about cheating on his wife and stuff? Yeah, I guess. If I thought he was better than the alternative. I don't really give a shit. But I also understand, particularly as a Republican, there's a lot of people that are going to be more concerned about those sort of social faux pas than me, and they won't vote for you. And I would say this is pretty much the nail in the coffin for him, particularly if this story is proven true. I would say his chance of winning is pretty much nil, barring some crazy scandal of his opponent. I just don't give a shit. I don't care. Accusations of like he's sexually assaulted a person or a child or he beat his wife. Those things are more serious. If you just definitively knew those things to be true, those are more severe. Then, I mean, it looks to me like if whoever typed these things, it was one of two things. One, it was designed to smear him, so it wasn't really him. I think it was probably him, but I don't know. Secondly, it seems like big man stories, and I don't like these big man stories, but I've seen this many times in my life, right? Where you're sitting around at a bar or something, and some dude's trying to impress you, and he's like, oh man. I had this guy I used to work with. It was the funniest shit. Like, the dude was bigger than me. Like, he was kind of a chubby guy. So I only throw that out there because when you hear, like, the details of the story, he'll tell you, like, really? So he wasn't wealthy. He's just some rural hick like me. And we'd be, like, sitting around at work, and he'd be like, hey, man, I was up at this party at IUP. It's a college. I was up at this party at IUP the other day, and did you ever see these two Playboy Playmates? They're twins. Yeah, they were at this party with me, man. So I start drinking, and I'm, like, beer bonging a beer, and this one comes up to me, and, like, I start talking to her, and the next thing you know, I, like, take her out in, like, the back of my car, and I just start putting the wood to her, and I'm banging her. And the next thing you know, her sister's furious, and she's beating on the door because she liked me. So then I was like, ladies, settle down, and I got them both in the car, and I just hooked up with both of them all night. And you're like, yeah. I'm sure that happened, dude. Yeah. And he also would always have these stories, too. Like, yeah, I was at this party, and this fucking dude, he was stacked. He's like 6'4", just jacked, man. He came up and started talking shit on me. So I was just like, why don't you throw the first punch? And he punched me, like, as hard as he could in the face, and I just took it. I grabbed him by the throat and just picked him up and slammed him on the ground. Next thing I know, like, 4 of his frat brothers jumped me, and I kicked all their asses. And, like, my response to those type of stories, I got tired of being like, dude, you're full of shit. You're full of shit. And even if you weren't, I don't care. It doesn't impress me. So I would just start, this would be my way of handling it. I'd be like, yeah, no shit, man. That happened. Well, I was at this party, and this dude, he had to be like 80 pounds soaking wet. Like, I went up and just started shit with him, because you know how I am. I was like, I'm going to impress everyone and beat some dude's ass at this party. So this guy looked like he had spina bifida or something. He could barely stand up straight. And I went up and I was like, hey, motherfucker, you got a problem with me? And I shoved him. And when he came at me, I just sucker punched him as hard as I could. And he just took it and beat the piss out of me. And he would be like, oh, yeah, man, that sucks. He didn't get that I was making fun of him, like, by telling the opposite story. Like, dude, I don't care that you think you're a tough guy. I don't care that you think you have to make up these ridiculous stories, you know. This is stupid. But that's what the Mark Robinson's, it sounds like some weird fetish. It sounds like some guy that's like, you know, oh, because it's like, I'm not going to get into specific details, but it's like, not only is it shit about, like, cheating on his wife with her sister, but there's a lot of, how do I put this? You guys remember the viral video, 2 Girls, 1 Cup? Yeah, there's some stuff similar to that that's being bragged about with certain fluids and what have, without getting into it. Now, it's not something that I particularly talk about on this show a lot, but I guess it's newsworthy today. So without getting more vulgar, use your imagination. My wife's already yelling at me, don't talk about that. Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like someone that's, like, getting off on talking about that. Whether or not those situations really happened, I don't know. There used to be, like, I think Seinfeld had this joke at one point. Like, one of the, like, pornographic magazines back in the day, I can honestly say I'd never seen this magazine, but I'm aware of it existing, is Penthouse Forum. And I'm not quite sure what it was, if it was like Playboy where it had nude photos or stuff. But what I'm aware of it, just through like comedy and stuff, is there were a lot of, like, people would write into the Penthouse Forum and they would tell them explicit stories. And I think it's Kramer's, like, making fun. Like, these stories are always like, you know, I was out on vacation, or I was out at work, and this chick came up to me and blah, blah, blah. It's just these, like, big man stories. And the joke is everybody knows it's bullshit. It's just guys telling these fantasy stories trying to sound like big men, you know. So, to me, that's what it sounded like. Do I think it was really him? It was probably him, but I haven't looked into the details. I don't know. Was it him trolling? Well, define trolling. Do I think he really did all of these acts? Probably not. Because some of them are so explicit and grotesque and he seems to be implying it's occurring on like a weekly basis. It sounds more to me like someone who has a fetish of talking like this than maybe doing these acts, but I can't speak to it. I don't know. I just don't give a shit that Democrats are going to pretend to care about this shit. They don't. They don't care. I care if this dude's really a Nazi and he really wants slavery. That's what I care. So, that's it. All right, we got people on the line. Let's take calls. I'm tired of talking about this grotesque stuff. Let's try to go in the order that I think I saw people. That's always a risk. Oh, I guess I have to join the... I got to join the chat myself, don't I? Or it won't work. Oh, and I got to put the headset on. All right. All right, we got some calls. First, God's favorite ant. I thought it said tenant for a minute, but I was like, wait a
No.
minute. What's up, God's favorite ant? How you doing, man?
Hey, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. What's happening?
I don't know where to start with. We agree on more than we disagree with. Although, I was going to bring up Andrew, but honestly, I don't want to. I know he's a friend of yours. I don't really want to.
Oh, I don't give a shit. You could. He's a big boy. He can handle it.
So I saw him on Timcast the other day, and it was very similar to how he was debating against the 19th Amendment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I came to the realization he's kind of in a phase of thing where he's basically a tyrant. Like, he's essentially got everything rooted in the idea that you can only enforce things through violence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, violence is the final arbiter of everything. You know, women shouldn't be able to vote because they don't have the strength to enforce their right to vote, even though voting isn't technically a right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so two things to say about that. I think one, he would separate what ought to be versus what is, and he would say it doesn't matter what you think ought to be, it is what is. So at the end of the day, if a bunch of people that are stronger with more guns disagree with you, well, then it doesn't matter if you're morally correct, because they will win because they have force. And so because of that, that may affect what he thinks ought to be, because in the back of his mind, he would always say, well, if you're reliant on force for these alleged rights you have, then you really don't have those rights unless you have the force. So therefore, we should embrace a system to ensure that we have the force. You know, I think in general, I'm not going to speak for Andrew, but I will say that I think a lot of people in that boat in general would quite honestly tell you they are authoritarian. I don't know that Andrew would, but I know there are people I've talked to from the Crucible that would. So let me give you an example. I think schools should be out of the business on indoctrinating people on morality. So I don't want them talking about you have to have acceptance for LGBT people and you got it, blah, blah. All that's bullshit. I think schools should be teaching math, science, history, civics. That's what I want schools to do. Now, I think the Department of Education should probably be removed anyways, but to the extent that we have that, that's what I think schools should be doing. That's clearly not what's occurring. They are indoctrination chambers. Many people that would come from sort of the Christian nationalism sect would say, we're fine with that. We're fine with schools being indoctrination chambers. We just want to control the message. We want to indoctrinate them with a Christian ethic. And that's what schools should be. Now, I disagree with that. I think, like, well, no, I'm taking the stance of, like, look, we should just say everybody has different beliefs on morality and stuff. It's not the place of public education to be instructing on that. But Andrew and them say, what's it matter? That's the status quo, what people like you say. And the left fills that vacuum and says, fine, we'll jump in and we'll teach our morality. So what they're saying is, two could play that game. We'll jump in and we'll teach our morality. So I think that they're wrong morally, if that makes sense. But strategically, I understand why they adopt that position, because they think if we don't, eventually the other side will. So why don't we do it to our advantage? Again, I disagree with that, but that's basically the argument.
I understand the pragmatic argument. You know, reality is reality.
Yeah.
But I think that Andrew discounts the idea of the words. I had the word on. Sorry.
That's all right.
I won't want to say coercion. It's the wrong word for it because I'm thinking of something that's a little more friendly. But the ability to be diplomatic and to just convince people of your position without necessarily having to club them over the head and make them agree with you. Like that is something that has existed almost as long as violence. I think at some point someone realized getting hit on the head really kind of sucks. Maybe just better just to come to an agreement that maybe we won't hit each other over the head with sticks if we can just,
Well, I think in the debate I had with Jim Bob and that Andrew sort of jumped in after the debate and the callers, I think that's one of the things that like they lose sight of, and it's difficult to explain. But they're sort of making this argument of force, right? And I don't disagree in the principle that all of your rights, whatever you consider them, you might say like Andrew, you don't have rights, or you might say like me, like there are rights, that are outlined in the Bill of Rights, etc., that are given to us by God, or you might believe in some other concept of rights. But whatever you think on that subject, at the end of the day, they are protected or enforced through force. And that's true. Like, it is true. Like, I understand that. But they, I think, falsely go to force as the end game and then make the implication that only the people on the ground are the ones that achieve force. And I think that's a mistake to look at it that way. Like, for example, let's look at the modern military. You might have a friend that gets drafted to be like I don't say this word derogatively, it's just a term that I've been told by my friends who served in the military. You might be like an on-the-ground grunt, like you're an infantryman, right? That's who they're talking about. That guy with a gun who's kicking in the door, right? Who's in Iraq, who's in Afghanistan, who's hunting Al-Qaeda, kicking in the door. That's force, right? But isn't it also force being that guy's general who's not kicking it, who, through whatever reason, has the authority to command these people? And you might say, well, his authority only works because he talked to other people with guns into these people with guns listening to him. Well, yeah, but still, convincing a bunch of people with guns that are very talented with it, or with physical power that are very talented, to unify as a single force and listen to you is itself a more dangerous or more forceful use of force than the infantryman with a gun. And because of that, you could say, in many ways, the ability to persuade is more effective, even pragmatically, than just being a really strong guy, because the person who could persuade can convince many really strong guys to listen to them, to enact force on their behalf. And so, sort of getting to what you're saying, becoming persuasive becomes more effective, even if it's only effective because at the end of the line, if you take things to the logical extent, a use of force may be necessary to protect the things that the person that wants to be persuasive about wants. Still, though, isn't that persuasion creating a more unified use of force that's more dangerous than an individual's use of force? And it's difficult to explain this concept, but I don't see what their answer to that is other than, but that's men. It still relies on men at the end of the day. If a woman becomes the most persuasive person in the world and can convince 50% of men to do something, someone like Andrew might say, well, that's garbage. Don't the men that she's persuading realize that they could overwhelm her because they have physical force and she doesn't? Well, they don't, though. So why isn't that her wielding the use of force?
Exactly. The face that launched 1,000 ships.
Right. Exactly. And so, and then, obviously, then the way it broke down in that debate was talking about, maybe their arguments about physical strength being use of force. And I think the even better argument's mentality, right? Like the mentality of being willing to fight, more likely with men than women. But it doesn't take into account modern technology. And I'm sorry, you could be the most badass MMA fighter in the world, and if it's a woman with an AR, you're fucked 95% of the time. Doesn't matter. That's just true. Now, on average, is a woman with an AR going to be worse off than a man with an AR? Yeah, that's probably true on average. But the way that Jim Bob articulates the argument about the actualization of force by individuals, and you have to be able to protect yourself, I think a gun's a great equalizer. And as technology progresses, it's going to get more and more equal in that sense. And then it gets into this esoteric argument about who created the gun? Who mined the materials that went into building the gun? And it's just I think that's all red herring. So in general, my feeling is I would prefer not to use force, but I would say Andrew would agree with me there. Andrew might say, it doesn't matter what I would prefer. Of course, if it was up to Andrew, everyone would voluntarily adhere to the tenets of Orthodox Christianity. I'm sure he would admit that and say, absolutely. I think that would be fantastic. But because that won't happen, do they, as Orthodox Christians, have the right to say, listen, in order to live our lives in a godly way, these are the things that a government should be doing, and we should wield power to make sure those happen. I think that's what he would default to.
Well, it's ancient wisdom. Si vis pacem parabellum.
Yeah. What's that, pig Latin? No, I'm just
No, that's Latin.
Yeah.
Latin. If you want peace, prepare for war.
Yeah. You know, and again, it's not something... Now, my ultimate position on this is as follows. One, in their system, in their society, seeing as how I happen to be Christian and I happen to have almost 95% of my values are going to line up with them, if all of a sudden we would get that form of Christian populism as the overwhelming force in our government, in our country, my life would probably be better off. Probably would, right? I wouldn't have to worry about my child being inundated with LGBT bullshit and, you know, feeling guilty because he's white or that he's a colonizer or shit like that. I would, you know, he would have influence all around him talking about the importance of Christ and of Christianity and the values therefore. So that would probably be better. And yet I still have to adhere to my own belief system, which says I value small government and the idea of individual liberty. And so I don't want the government to enforce those sorts of ethics on other people. So I'm vehemently against the current status quo of what I see as indoctrination through government, through things like censorship, corruption, pushing cultural agendas that I think are anathema to what I believe. I'm vehemently against that. But I don't think that we should do radical shit like say, then women don't have the right to vote. Or then we need to take schools over and have them be Christian indoctrination chambers. I'm against that level of it.
As someone who grew up in the 70s and 80s and was there firsthand for a lot of the evangelicals at the time, I can tell you that there's some of that Christian stuff that can be just like I like playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid, and according to the church and the right, this was like a road to Satanism, and there's all kinds of. I'm not saying it was as bad as today's. Like I still think progressivism is way worse, and I think that even if we went back to that, we'd probably still be better off. But there were still some really annoying things about.
Well, I mean, the first time I debated Andrew Wilson. I mean, one of the topics that came up, I was like, take a gay actor, right? So take like George Takei, who is Sulu on Star Trek, right?
I know he is.
Super gay in real life. I'm not saying that to insult him. I think he would admit that. He's just clearly a gay man, right?
Mm-hmm. And insufferable on social
He
media.
is insufferable. I dislike him extremely. Absolutely. Right? Let's say that Christian populism takes over and they start recrafting these laws. And one of the things they want are no depictions of gay people on entertainment shows. Right? That's one of the things they want. So you can't have a character. You have a new Star Trek. There can't be a character on Star Trek that's gay. Okay? That's something that Andrew was saying. I said, but what about an actor who you know is gay, but is portraying a straight character? Like George Takei. So let's say George Takei plays Sulu on Star Trek, but he's like married to a hot chick. And he's all about like, we need to have kids, procreate, whatever. Is that allowed? Thanks so much, Creamy Ranch, for the follow. Then he was like, I don't know, probably not. And I'm like, oh, it's just, you can see the slippery slope that you're going down, right? And then other things, if you watched the previous debate I had with Andrew Wilson on sort of Christian populism, you know, I talked about some of the specific things that he agrees with that I just could not abide by if someone like him was put in charge through like an authoritarianism. One of the things that Andrew Wilson firmly believes is that a husband and wife are of one body. And because of that, there is no such thing as the crime of rape for a husband to a wife. So if the woman screaming, stop, let me go, does not matter. She has, by marrying the man, she has given consent throughout time. Whenever, wherever, doesn't matter if she's in pain, doesn't matter if she's asleep, doesn't matter if she's screaming no. She is your body, and just like you could do whatever you want with your hand, you could do whatever you want with her body. Right? To the point where he even admits, if you decided you wanted to cut off your wife's arm because that's your body, he thinks that people should counsel you on intervention, just like if you wanted to cut off your own arm, people should intervene and say, don't do that. But it should not be illegal. It should not be illegal. You should be allowed to cut off your wife's arm if you want. Now, is that a system of laws that I would like to see in my country? Of course not. I think once you start to get into the specifics of this shit, it clearly goes way over the line. Like, way over the line. So for me, and it's difficult to say, well, then what's the threshold, Rob? Because if the alternative is we say, well, there's not a place for sort of, that sort of, use of force or use of authoritarian to spread Christian values, then we end up with the status quo, drags queen story hour. And I say, no, there is a threshold. And I know this isn't the greatest argument and people don't like this, but the problem is, unless you take a complete extreme political ideology, you will always suffer the threshold problem. So, for example, if you take complete authoritarianism, which is the government has 100% control over your life, you cannot make one decision, no matter how small, the government makes it for you. Well, then political discussion becomes very easy. Do you think we should have a law that tells people what drugs they can smoke? Yes! Oh, really? What's your rationale? Because the government should control everything about your life. That's the answer on every single question. But if you're an anarcho-capitalist and you believe in no government whatsoever, do you think there should be a law that, no, they'll yell. Doesn't matter what the end of that sentence is. Nope. Shouldn't be a law. Right? And so anyone that doesn't fall on either of those extremes, if I say, well, clearly I think there's a place for some laws and some government, but I think it should be vastly limited. But I do think that we should value people's individual will and freedom. Then the question basically becomes this. Do you think there should be a speed limit law? Sure, I could say if you're, in a school zone, I don't want people driving 200 mile an hour. Makes sense. There's kids around. What about 100 mile an hour? Yeah, I guess no. What about 50 mile an hour? Okay, we'll say that's no good either. Less than 50. What about 45? Okay, you can't go 45. What about 40? What about 35? What about 30? What about 25? And eventually I'll be like, no, I think 25 is okay. What about 26? Yeah, I guess 26 is okay. What about 27? And eventually I'll have to say, 26 okay, 27 not. Well, why? That's arbitrary. How'd you come up with that number? How do you define what your threshold is there? And the truth is, you have to look at things on a case-by-case basis, and that is arguing from a position of weakness. It's very similar, it's like similar to when you get into these semantics, like what is a woman? What is a man? Things that we all know what it is, but it's very hard to define. What is the definition of the word is? What is a chair? Right? And I've done these games with people. It's actually harder than you think to come up with all-encompassing definitions of things we just all know. We all know what a chair is, but go ahead and define it. Right? And I've done this exercise with people. People be like, a device for sitting on, typically with 4 legs and a back. And it's like, okay, well, I have a chair in the room here that's three legs. Now what? Okay, I guess sometimes it could have 3 legs. Okay, but I have a chair that's literally no legs. It's just one base with a back. So that'd be like 1 leg? Or just a stand? And you can see how all of a sudden, what's a human being? Well, you could define genetically what a human being is. But isn't it true that someone could be a human and have some sort of genetic abnormality? So doesn't that mean that... you could play this game. You could keep playing this game. The same's true with these threshold arguments. You could play the game. But we all know, it's... we don't want people driving dangerously fast. And at some point, especially around children. So at some point you say, I'm okay with there being some limit. And that might not be perfect and it might be arbitrary to some extent, right? The same is true, I think, of sort of the position that the Christian nationalists are coming from. If you take the position, I'm Eastern Orthodox and therefore every one of our laws should be crafted by people that are Eastern Orthodox and whatever my, maybe Zen's forehead knows, is it a priest? Is that the name of the... clergyman in Orthodoxy? I don't know, but priest, pastor. Tell you. Yeah, whatever they say goes. Well, that's an answer. And the advantage to that saying, I have mine. When you ask me, where do I get my code of ethics? Where do I get my laws? That guy. Simple. Where do you get yours, Rob? And I say, well, I have this principle of individualism and liberty. And, so I look at things on a case-by-case basis. And it's weaker. It's harder to argue. But the advantage that something like me has is they then have to bite every bullet. Okay, your priest tells you can chop off your wife's arm. They have to go, yeah, we should allow that. So that's sort of the ebb and flow of the arguing from a complete extreme. I'm not even using extreme as a bad word, as a pejorative. I'm using extreme as like you're literally as far to one side of the ledger as you could get. It's simplistic. It allows you to make those arguments. I don't have to make these absurd, arbitrary threshold arguments. Absolutely true. But then you have to bite the bullet on everything, right? Like once that's it, that's all there is to it, then you have to bite that bullet. So, the last thing I'll say on this, and then if you got a final word, that's cool, is, one of the things is, despite the fact of the apparent extremism of Andrew Wilson, I think you'd take comfort in actually listening to him explain with his religion. I grew up, and I went to a Pentecostal church that spoke in tongues and stuff, and one of the big turnoffs I had was they were adamant that even people that consider themselves Christians that did not follow the particular denomination of Christianity that we are involved in were probably going to burn in hell. And it really jaded me because I was like, that's so rough. Like to be hearing this as a 13-year-old, like really, all my friends that go to church, but not this church, they're burning for eternity in hell. And so I was interested in what orthodoxy says on that question. And assuming that Andrew's correct when he tells me this, that is not their belief. They don't take positions like that. They're taking positions on how we should act. But they're not taking positions on what God will do to us based on how we act. And so I actually find that in some ways far less extreme than many other denominations. So in that sense, like, it's like, okay, I get that. So I don't know. I ultimately think that Andrew is a moral man and that for him, like, it's difficult for him to articulate this, but he would be like, but I would never treat my wife like that. If my wife asked me not to do something, I wouldn't unless I thought it was necessary for the safety and goodness of our family. But I don't take advantage of it. But biblically, this is the way it's supposed to be. The woman serves the man, and I make the decision, and that's the way it should be, and we should model that in law. And I won't take advantage of that because I'm a good and decent man. And I believe that about Andrew Wilson. I really do. But if we enacted a code of laws like that, do I believe that's how every man would act? Of course not. And so it's difficult to then say, oh, you shouldn't be allowed to charge a man for chopping off his wife's arm because he would say, well, that's my body. She consented to be one with me, so I'm allowed to chop off her arm. That's it, I guess. So I understand Andrew's, and you have to understand this as well. Like the Crucible audience, they get heated. They talk to me like this, but all I can do is talk the truth. This is what I really believe. But I love Andrew. I think he's great. He's one of the nicest guys on here. I think Rachel's fantastic. I think Jim Bob's fantastic. I like all those people. I love the Crucible audience, even when they say that that I'm cucked, that my wife's abusing me, and that I'm a feminazi or this, that, and the other. I don't mind. I still like him.
I don't think Andrew's a bad dude. I just disagree with him on a few issues. I think there's probably a lot we'd agree on.
Well, that's it. That's the other thing I'll say is, like, I think that things are so extreme right now that there's all of these groups that will eventually have arguments, but we're all pushing in the same direction now. So the camera's sort of backwards for me, but like, let's say the left would be here right now. This is my right, but if this is the left, right, like we're over here. Just this, it's not a left-right problem really, but just for the sake of illustrating. So we're like right here. There's where our authoritarianism is. And paleo conservatives and Orthodox Christian nationalist and populist and anarchist and left-wing populist and libertarians and constitutionalists, they're all over here somewhere. And so right now, all of those groups should be working together. Now, eventually, if we win and if we get out of this corrupt, pseudo-progressive, like garbage authoritarianism, we'll start to go this way, and then we might start to diverge eventually. But right now, the important part is all pushing in that direction, because that's the stakes that we're up against. So, yeah, I mean, I think Andrew Actually, Andrew's one of the most strategic people you'll meet on this. And, I don't know that I'm giving up any secrets here, but one of the conversations I had with Andrew years ago was he correctly, well before me, saw the dangers of some of this LGBTQ indoctrination, particularly the worst shit of men coming into women's spaces and what that will lead to. And you have to be careful with terms of service, but he predicts, and I think he's absolutely correct, even though 4 years ago I would have questioned this, that it will get to the point of normalizing. If we can't define what a man and woman is, can we define what 18 is? Can we define what a child is? And then your mind could go from there. what the logical extrapolation of what that means is. And he would tell me right to my face, he's like, dude, to me, the most important thing is getting people together that will fight against that position. I don't give a shit if you're a libertarian, if you're Catholic, if you're Christian, if you're whatever you are, if you're atheist, I don't care. That is the issue that we must push back on. And I think that that says a lot to his strategic mind of sort of the direction that he understands that we need to go. And, it's just like, I've said this for years. I have political allies all over the place that you would be like, how does that make sense? How could I ally with a Bernie supporter? I despise communism. Well, because if their argument is that the system's corrupt and our vote doesn't matter because of a corrupt system and it screws people like Bernie over, sure, to me, that's the single most important issue. Mm-hmm. That's a precursor to everything else. If I see a bunch of black nationalists, I don't like the ideology of black nationalism, but they're marching with me about the importance of the First and Second Amendment, welcome. I agree. Those are important issues. That's more important than my dislike of black nationalism. So yes, I would proudly march with people that feel that this country is systemically racist against them, that want to defend their right to protect themselves. They should want to. So should I. Even though we disagree on so much, that issue, if the Second Amendment's that important to you, you should accept allies, even from groups that you would disagree with on other things. So
yeah, if you think the whole system is against you, then you should be fighting to maintain the tools that help you protect yourself.
Totally agree. You
can't rely on the system. What you're describing, though, is exactly what we saw like 8 years ago with the rise of the progressives. Like when they started getting elected, at first, like Pelosi and the others, they completely rejected the likes of AOC and Ilhan Omar and whatnot. But like overnight, sometime, I don't know exactly when, there was like a switch that flipped. Like something in Pelosi's mind, she's like, "Wait, I can use these people." And suddenly she's backing everything they're doing, and they're all on the same side. They're all pushing, like you said, to what they want, to their goal, even though it's not the goal we want.
I think, to me, that it wasn't that Pelosi ever disliked AOC. It's that AOC's giving the game away. Like, Pelosi's smart enough to know that a lot of the radical authoritarian positions that they want under the guise of progressivism are very unpopular. So you have to lie to people. You can't just be like, yeah, damn right, we want open borders and give everyone a path to citizenship. Pelosi's smart enough to know you're not supposed to say that. AOC's basically saying that shit. So it wasn't that they disagreed. It's that they disagreed on stylistic. AOC comes from an age where she thinks, she grew up in a world where that's the predominant prevailing position. So she thinks everyone in the world agrees with that. She thinks everyone is like a college student that's like, yeah, this is the moral and righteous position. Welcome everyone in with open arms. And Pelosi's like, shut up. Don't say that. Right. And now I think that you could see AOC, and I think even a lot of AOC fans now would say, well, AOC's in a better place because she understands sometimes you got to play ball. Sometimes you got to accept things that you don't really like. You got to toe the party line. And it's actually amazing.
Somebody had to come to Jesus talk with her.
I'm sure. And like, it's amazing how the Democratic Party completely marches in lockstep. Like, you can't imagine, like the January 6th committee where you had like the Republicans on it were Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. If there was a committee about like corruption of the Harris-Biden administration and they were like, nope, only these two Democrats are allowed on. Can you imagine two Democrats like basically being like all in on MAGA? Like, yes, Harris and Biden were corrupt. They've weaponized lawfare. There's no chance. No. Who would those two Democrats be? If they're out there, they would have already defected to the Republican Party. And if they
remember the name of that I think it was the senator that was usually. He was the only one who would like vote against the Democrats on a reliable basis. I can't remember his name. He's not in office anymore. I don't think.
Lieberman? I don't know.
Not Lieberman. It was, I can't think of his name.
But I hear you.
Sorry.
No. But I'm going to let you go. I got some people on the line. But thanks so much, man, for calling. Yes, I really appreciate it. We'll talk soon. So thank you. All right. I'll put the link out there again. We got 3 or 4 more people on the line here. So we'll put the link out there. I apologize. It doesn't tell me the order that people come in. So I'm trying my best to go in the order that I think I saw them. Now, I will bring this next person on because I think they wanted to talk yesterday. So we'll give them 10 minutes or so. I think this is a return guest. All right. 693. I believe you go by Scratch. Is that correct? Or am I wrong? Is this someone completely different? No, it is someone completely. 693. Can you hear me?
How's it going, Rob?
Good. We talked the other day.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What do you want to talk about today? Thanks for calling back in.
So I have, well, not necessarily a bone or two to pick with you, but I think you're not necessarily seeing some major, well, some of the finer points that our friend was trying to make. I forget what his name. Oh, made by Jim Bob.
Hmm.
Um, can I ask you, where is the majority of domestic violence cases? Where are they usually pointed at?
So it depends on how you look at this. So the people that get arrested are predominantly men. The way that the averages, like per capita, are, lesbian relationships by far have more domestic violence than any other relationship. I believe gay men are at the bottom, with heterosexual relationships being in between. There are reporting, and I think there's a lot of truth to this, that actually in a heterosexual relationship, women tend to commit more violence than men, but the violence doesn't rise to the level of men. In other words, an act we would consider violence, like slapping someone, that actually happens way more. The physical putting of hands on your partner, I believe much research says, happens way more with women than it does with men. It's just when the man happens to put his wife hands on the woman, either because of increased intensity through testosterone, or more importantly, increased physical acumen, they tend to do more damage. So if a woman puts her hands on a man,
Right.
it might lead to a red mark on his face. If a man puts his hand on a woman, it may lead to a broken orbital bone. And so we have this narrative that men are overwhelmingly more abusive to women, but that doesn't necessarily paint a full picture. It also doesn't paint the picture of psychological abuse and psychological violence. And studies again show, again, I know there are studies that go the opposite way in this, but I think I know what you're talking about. Studies again show when it comes to that sort of, what we would consider abuse, that oftentimes it's women far more likely to commit those sort of acts of abuse against men than vice versa. And in many cases, depending on the level that we're talking about, psychological abuse could be far more damaging long term than physical abuse.
So there's overtly aggressive and then there's passive aggressive. Women are more likely to poison you to death than they are to try and hit you in the face.
Yeah, that's true. Most
But the
women,
bit,
I think the number one way that women kill their spouses is through poison, whereas men, it's more likely to be something like stabbing, shooting, strangulation, a more physical, like, I think that's true. I watch a lot of crime dramas.
so can I and this is I'm trying to be generous here,
Mhm.
right? Can I say that your
You don't have to,
example is
you could
kind
be a
of
dick. I
something?
don't care. Go for it.
No, no, well, I like you, Rob, and I
It's
don't
okay.
necessarily disagree with you, but I have an issue or two with the
Okay.
way you were framing this the other
Okay.
day, right? I'm trying to be charitable, but can I then say that you are making and committing a too cool quay fallacy, that you are taking the smallest example and you're holding it true for the whole shot? I'm paraphrasing, of course, but I think you understand where I'm going with this.
Well, in what specific aspect? Because you're saying
So
in my
if
debate
I'm
with the 19th
standing
Amendment, that with Jim Bob?
Yes. Well, and it's not necessarily that I don't think women should have the right to have a say. That's not my contention. It was the way you framed it. I think you left some key points off the table. Uh,
Let me
how
see
should
if
I
I
put
get.
this?
Let me see if I could, because I'm not getting the direct correlation between the first question you asked me and this. So let me see if I could steelman your position of what you're trying to say. You think because I'm basically taking the exception to the rule, and I'm saying something like, well, there are women that can keep up with men at the very fringes, right? So like if we took like a marker and said, in order to be a firefighter, you have to be able to bench press 300 pounds. Yeah, is there a woman or two out there that could do that? Sure, there might be one or two women, but overwhelmingly, the people that will be able to do that will be men and not women. So therefore, to say, use that as an example of what I'm talking about is sort of a fallacy, because I'm taking these ridiculous, infinitesimally small percentages that are on the extreme and using that to illustrate a broader point. Is that sort of what you're trying to say?
Well, the way you framed it is that a woman with a gun is the great equalizer.
Sure.
Well, the problem is if I was standing face to face with a woman with a gun and I was standing face to face with a man with a gun, I'm running away from the man. I'm rushing the woman. The woman, A, probably doesn't have the reaction time, B, isn't familiar with target assessment, and C, doesn't have the same killer instinct as a man would. Okay. Now, the other issue here is that we've been dealing with women like 70% single parent households and 80% female teaching, right? So the reality is, you tell us that women have the right to say, to vote, but the other reality is that they've also had a huge influence on society as a whole. So, and the other thing is that they point their finger at us and blame us.
Okay, so you're making a lot of points here. First, to address your first point, I addressed this point in the debate. The question isn't, I said this over and over with Jim Bob, in a litany of ways. If it's a average man with a gun and an average woman with a gun, which one would I say would be more proficient in that use of force? Man, almost every time. If it is an army of standing men with guns versus an army of standing women with guns, who would win? 999 out of 1,000 times the men. I don't know how many more times I could say it, right? So, do you understand that part, that I firmly believe that? I can move
No,
on from that.
that's why I wasn't harping on that point. But I
Okay.
had to go
So then
over it.
second,
It
but
was
then second, the mistake you make is the same mistake Jim Bob made. Jim Bob's syllogism goes as follows. I can't remember all of it exactly, but the first part of the syllogism becomes the most important in the debate. Because if you go down to the end, he says, he knows that I'm going to say that I believe in principles of like liberty. But in order to have liberty, you have to have sovereignty. And sovereignty is sort of control and ownership over your own life. And in order to have sovereignty, you have to have the adequate ability to use force to defend your sovereignty. The ownership over your life. In other words, you don't have ownership over your life if you can't defend your life. If someone comes to you and says, I'm going to take your life, and you don't have an adequate ability to say, fuck you, you're not, then you don't have ownership over your life. Okay? But the way he frames it and says it's because an individual's adequate ability to defend their life, the question doesn't become who you got, man versus woman. The question becomes, can we see a scenario where a woman has the adequate ability to defend their life? Yes, because when we're talking about defense of life, we now have what is the great equalizer, which is technology such as a gun. So it's not the same as like before the gun, where maybe for home defense you would use something like a club or a sword or an axe or a spear. Because of the differences in physical capabilities between men and women, and using something such as a melee weapon, on average, the woman's ability to defend herself against an aggressive man would be incredibly lower than today. If someone breaks into a woman's house and she has a shotgun, there is a very good chance that she will be able to defend herself. Would she be able to defend herself as well as a man would be able to in that same scenario? Probably not on average. I would say 80 to 90% with, so rare exceptions, a woman who is trained versus a man who is completely untrained. For example, a man that has a gun but has literally never loaded it, never used it, small comfort that gun will be when someone breaks into the house and they don't know how to load it. Now, they might be able to use physical force to defend themselves, their family, etc., but the gun wouldn't be that effective in that scenario. A woman that's gone to the range and knows how to load a gun and knows how to pull a trigger might not have the same aggression levels of that man, but just having that training, I think, would meet my definition of an adequate ability to use force to protect yourself and your property. So you're mistaking that it becomes a competition. And it doesn't have to be a competition the way the syllogisms word. The wording was, doesn't have to be an adequate ability for a person to defend themselves. That doesn't mean that they have to be able to kick the ass out of 51% of the people in the world. That doesn't mean that. And so I reject sort of your argument that is, well, I would charge a woman with a gun and run away from a man with a gun, and so therefore women don't have an adequate ability to use force to protect their life. I disagree with that.
No, I was going to go the other direction. I think women are actually way more savage. I think you give a woman the technology to defend herself and it won't be defense anymore. And I think because of a lack of judgment and the ability to discern the difference, that people, individuals such as yourself, would be willing to turn a blind eye to any actions by the simple ideal that the woman couldn't defend herself unless she had the means to do so in the first place.
I completely reject that. That's a completely different argument, and I completely reject that. Right? I reject
that was going to be my argument.
But again,
I'm not piggybacking off. I'm not piggybacking off of Jim Bob's argument. So
then you reject you reject the entire premise of Jim Bob's argument, because under what you just said, it seems to me that you're saying this. Well, see, the problem is women will go beyond defense. So, for example, the milkman.
To a degree, absolutely.
The milkman comes and drops off a jar of milk. Bam! She shoots him because she's an aggressive.
Right.
Fuck it, I have a gun. I shoot. right? And so therefore she's no, well, that's
Tell me
completely,
I'm wrong.
wait, that's completely irrelevant to her ability to defend herself. Going beyond defense takes no part in the syllogism that Jim Bob's using. We would just
I
say
know. I'm
at the
not-
moment
I'm
when
not
that,
piggybacking.
okay, so then
My issue
but
was
then-
with the way you framed it.
But then to say I have a two coke fallacy, right? It's not really a fallacy if you're arguing something completely different than what was being argued in the context of this debate. So then, secondly,
No. That was a question related to your argument.
but my argument, but what part is the fallacy in my argument?
You're saying that because there's examples of women being able to defend themselves with guns, that should hold for the whole shot for women that don't have any experience with guns.
No,
But
that's
like
not
you
what I
you
said.
You already.
My argument in that debate
that
was
was-
my argument in that debate was that we should not reject people's right to have a say in the direction of this country based on immutable
I
characteristics.
understand that.
And if you're going to say that there are meritocracy reasons, such as only someone with the right to defend themselves, then I don't see how you could completely say that means no women could vote. If you want to set that metric and say you have to have the ability to defend yourself, surely that would imply some men then wouldn't have the right to vote and some women would have the right to vote. Now, it might be 95% of the men have the right to vote and only 5% of the women or something like that. But that's a different argument than wholesale women shouldn't have the right to vote. So I don't think that I'm making a fallacy in that. Now, what you're arguing seems to be something completely different, and I'm not sure what it is. Like, are you saying that because women are more aggressive, they shouldn't be allowed to vote? Is that what you're saying?
No. What I'm saying is that could have been a potential hole in your argument. That could have been a vector for attack as far as Jim Bob is concerned, if he would have thought to go that route and say that women are more vindictive and passive aggressive. Therefore, they would have less of a reason to be heard because they don't have the experience to make the proper decisions based on their life experience of being treated as a female that can get away with their actions based on the fact that she can't defend herself. What I was saying in that argument specifically was that because of people like you who believe that women should have a say, and that the idea that the only way that a woman can defend herself is with an equalizer, and that we're going to hold this whole shot for the whole, because all women need to defend themselves is a weapon, right? And that was where I was going with the two Kokwe. Okay, so we're going to take this one example of how a woman defended herself successfully with a gun, and we're going to just splay that out across all women. Now all women can defend themselves because of technology.
No one said that. No one said that.
That's kind of what you did.
That is not what anyone said. Show me
because of
one time.
modern
Show me
you
one
said
time.
Because of modern
You could yell. You could yell.
technology,
You could
women-
yell. You could yell if you want. I could yell louder, and I have a mute button. I want you to find timestamp in that debate where I said all women can defend themselves. Go for it.
That's not what I said. What I was saying was that would be a two Kokwe fallacy where you're holding the small part true for the whole shot, meaning that if one woman in an example of being able to defend herself with a gun means all women have the ability to
I
defend
never
themselves
said
with
that. I
technology.
never said that,
is
and I.
exactly what you said.
Okay,
That is
then I
exactly
go back.
what you said. You said
Okay. Then I want you to timestamp it. I want you to go and timestamp when I said all women can defend themselves. Go ahead, timestamp it. Go back and find the timestamp where I said that.
Well, hold on a second.
Now wait. But before you go on. Now I already said once. Can you timestamp it? I never said all women could defend themselves. You said I didn't say you said that, and then you literally just repeated 10 seconds later. You implied or said that all women could defend themselves. So I again ask you.
I didn't
Okay,
say
when did I
said
imply that? When did I imply that? When I said specifically the exact. You sound like a lefty. You sound like a lefty. That's what it sounds like. So it wasn't. It didn't matter what the. It didn't matter. You said that it didn't matter what my specific words were. In secret, I was dog whistling an implication that all women can defend. Okay, but if I specifically said in that debate, I'm not talking about all women. You're saying that should be ignored, and instead the implication is I am talking about all women.
You're saying that any woman, given the technology, could defend herself.
I'm saying
That's
that
exactly
any
what you're
woman.
saying.
I'm saying that any woman that has training and the ability to use a gun would meet Jim Bob's definition of adequate ability to use force.
So all women can defend themselves.
I'm saying
Therefore,
that
all
any
women can
woman
defend
given a
themselves.
That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that any woman that goes through a specific set of training that has access to a firearm could meet the definition that Jim Bob set forth of an adequate ability to use force. Now, there are clearly exceptions to that.
Give me an example of a woman that can't do that. Give me an example.
A paraplegic woman. A paraplegic woman. A 2-day-old born girl. A woman who is bedridden with dementia, who's 90 years old. A woman who is a burn victim who can't get out of bed. A woman who is comatose. Would you like more?
I mean, can you say within the advancement of technology that they wouldn't in the near future have training and technological ability to defend themselves in the future?
Hypothetically, if we have Neuralink to where a person in a coma
but isn't that your argument?
That is not my argument, but I will say that hypothetically...
I'm confused then.
Right, if you're confused because you're not listening and you're arguing things that were never argued and claiming that I'm making implications that I never made, and you're confusing yourself because you're not listening to the words I'm saying. So, yes, to answer your question in the affirmative... Hypothetically, if we end up in a future where people could control mobile Gundam type soups, even if they're comatose, through some sort of Neuralink technology, then yes, that comatose woman who would have the ability to control a literal 30-foot tall mech with rocket launchers and flamethrowers and machine guns would have the ability to defend herself against a home intruder. I guess agree. That's true.
I agree. And
okay,
that was your argument. I also agree that was your argument. And
okay, and the argument is somehow so that's a fallacy because women could be more aggressive than men, and therefore you're not saying they shouldn't have the right to vote. But Jim Bob could have said that.
Well, that was a question. I mean, you could frame it like I said it that way. Sure, I don't understand.
It's like you're making two disparate points, and I don't understand it. I don't understand what you're saying. Like
I'm just asking a simple question. Like if you're
I'm giving you straightforward answers. I'm giving you straightforward answers. If the argument is someone breaks into your house, can you defend yourself? Formerly, before the advent of technology we have today, before we had technology of swords, a woman's chance to defend herself was far less because they would have to rely on almost like a club or their physical hands, and they're on average going to be weaker than men, so they're going to be incredibly disadvantaged. Then once we got technology that was more sophisticated and more lethal, like a sword or a Bronze Age, steelworking, etc. Yes, you would have a chance, perhaps an arrow. It still would be a very low percentage of a woman to be able to defend herself, but that would have went up than if she was forced to use her hands. Yes, that weapon would increase her chances, particularly against an unarmed intruder. Then if we go a little further and we say, well, what about rudimentary firearms, such as flintlocks? Yes, that would have increased her chance somewhat more. Now, because of the unreliable nature of flintlocks and the ability to, you sort of have to load them manually and stuff that maybe if you don't have the physical prowess would be much more difficult, they still would not have had a good chance. But once we get to firearm technology of today, where the actual physical ability is so low, it's the threshold to actually being able to load a Glock, to cock it, and to pull a trigger is so low, and the training level necessary to literally just defend yourself from an unsuspecting home intruder would be so low that yes, it means that on average, a woman who has a slight level of proficiency in firearms would be able to have adequate defense. That's the argument I'm making. Certainly that's not all women. For example, many women don't have guns. Many women that have guns will have never trained to use one and would panic in the moment and have no idea what to do. But the same could also be said of the same could also be said of men. Now, less men would fall into that category. Probably on average in the United States, more men own guns than women. And I would assume that those men, even with the same amount of training or limited training, have a far better chance to be proficient at it than women on average. All of that's true. But nonetheless, it meets the threshold of adequate ability to defend yourself for the purpose of sovereignty if you're a woman who has a gun. So the person that's making the wholesale argument isn't me. I'm not saying therefore all women should be treated this way because a handful of women. I'm saying this is actually more than a handful of women, and my argument is that's reason to not say no woman can vote. If we're using the reason being because you don't have the ability to protect your sovereignty. That was my argument.
Right. I understand that. And
so your criticism's to Jim Bob, not me.
Well, and that's exactly correct, but not completely. Okay, I was trying to point out a possible flaw in your logic by saying that women being more vindictive, having sovereignty, would show examples of why sovereignty should not be given to the individual.
Listen, there's
Individual,
the
I,
truth. The truth is, there's a litany of other arguments that you can make. For example, Jim Bob could have made this argument: women tend to make less than men, and I think we should have a threshold that you have to make so much and pay so much into the system to have a voice. So therefore, we say women don't vote. Right, and I would have answers against that. You could say, I think women are more apt to use firearms negligently than men, therefore women shouldn't have a right to vote, and I would have answers to that. So technically, you're right. There are.
Let me ask you a question,
infinite.
Rob. Let me ask you
Okay.
a question. Okay, can I ask you a question, please?
Sure.
So if I go out with a gun and I start shooting people at random,
Yeah.
is that an example of sovereignty needing to be taken away from an individual?
Sure, I'd say that we have a system that says if you break laws like that, then you have given away your right to have input in our system. We could take away your rights when you act in a way as an individual that shows that you no longer deserve those rights. For example, you have the right to freely associate with your friends and speak freely, but if you murder people, you lose those rights and you go to prison.
Now, where would the threshold, like at the very low end, begin for that? Like, would you say if I went streaking through the street?
No. Like, we have an arbitrary
No.
threshold that's set, so that might be felonies, right? Now, I could agree or disagree with that, and I don't have a problem talking about the specific nature of what crimes should we take away people's right to vote for, but this is a completely different conversation. In fact, I preempt this
I'm
when
not
I'm
trying
but
to-
let me finish. I preempt this in my conversation with Jim Bob because what I say is, if we're going to have a discussion based on having to earn your right to vote through some sort of meritocratic process. In other words, if we say you have to, like the movie or the book Starship Troopers, like you have to serve in the military to earn citizenship. Like we could talk about that, and maybe I'll agree with some shit, and maybe I'll
I'm
disagree.
granting that.
But what I'm saying is,
granting all
but
that,
wait,
Rob. I
wait.
believe everything. Yep.
But listen, let me finish, right? So what you're asking me is something completely different than the topic at hand. Should women have the right to vote? Now you're saying, are there times when a woman or any person for that matter could act in a way that we could legitimately take away their right to vote? Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. What's that have to do
Okay,
with the topic?
Well, it does. It has a lot to do with the topic because what we're really talking about here is our level of tolerance for, I mean, more or less things that annoy us, right? I mean,
No.
if we're being honest about it,
That's not
well,
true.
okay, it doesn't annoy you. It doesn't annoy you that Jim Bob doesn't believe women should vote. That's
No.
not an annoyance.
I find boy bands to be annoying. I don't think the fact that you like a boy band means you shouldn't be allowed to vote. I don't think that Justin Timberlake
So-
shouldn't be allowed to vote because I find him annoying.
So women that are vindictive, right? That go
Yes,
after the
vindictive
things
people
we
should be allowed to
cherish.
vote.
I'm not.
And
I'm not
ugly people should
saying-
be allowed to vote. And annoying people should be allowed to vote. And loud people should be allowed to vote. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you're hearing my side of this argument. I really, really don't.
I'm not. That's
Look, I'm-
true. It seems.
Right, yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The overarching discussion is about who should have the right to vote. The specific discussion with me and Jim Bob is, should women have the right to vote? My argument is, on this particular question, I do not think that we should reject someone's right to vote because of immutable characteristics that they can't change. And then I say, there are conversations to be had about whether we could restrict people's right to vote. If we should have a meritocratic process of it, like, should you have to be a landowner? Should you have to be pass some sort of IQ test? Should you have to have some sort of civil service or military service? I'm not saying I agree or disagree with any of that, but those conversations are completely separate from whether or not we should be able to reject someone's ability for an immutable characteristics like the sex that they were born. I think that that's wrong. I don't think we should do that. Jim Bob says, but here's why your view's wrong, because it's based on this concept of individual freedom and liberty. But in order to have individual freedom and liberty, you have to have sovereignty. In order to have sovereignty, you have to be able to use adequate force. And so that becomes the debate. That's what we're talking about. And now you're calling in and you're
understand.
like, well, I'm not really talking about whether or not we should reject all women's right to vote. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying, can we restrict people's right to vote? Because what we're really talking about is people that annoy us, which I don't think that's what I'm talking about at all, but apparently that's what you're talking about. And so I'm getting lost in that I'm conceding to you. I've already conceded the main point that, sure, there are times when I think, Jim Bob should have the right to vote. Absolutely, Jim Bob should have the right to vote. Seems like a decent guy. If Jim Bob becomes the next Ted Bundy and a serial killer, and he goes to prison for the rest of his life, should he have the right to vote taken away from him? Sure. So your general claim of, but can it be true that people take actions that we could then take away their rights, including their right to vote? Yes. So I don't understand then where we go from here. Like, you're like, but it's about people that annoy us. That's where I'm confused. What's the unclarity on my position, or what's the disagreement that you're having with my position?
How much are you willing to tolerate? Basically, where I was going with that. Okay, look, let's blow this out the other direction then, because this was where I was going with this. If we can find enough examples of people in individuality abusing their rights to the point where we have to make a law, right, refraining people from that individual liberty or freedom, then all it takes is a majority of people to make that decision. So then the reality is your rights are no longer considered rights, but privileges. And they're at the whim of the majority, which, by the way, is secretly hating us, calls us pigs.
I don't understand. So then your point seems to be what is versus what ought. I'm talking about what ought. What ought to be is we don't restrict people's rights for immutable characteristics. Your argument seems to be women are an individual woman could be good or bad, but in general, overarchingly, women are vindictive monsters who are running the world in a way that is negative to men who are on average good.
I didn't say all that.
But that's your implication.
I didn't say run the world. I said, well, my implication is that they target us misogynistic pigs.
Okay, so you're saying that
I'm wrong about
you're saying
that's not the general consensus.
No, I don't know that it's the general consensus, but your general consensus by default would be that of misandry. That you're claiming women are misandrist, correct? That's literally what you're saying here. That on average, women hate men.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Wait, I don't understand. So let me tell you how I get to that. You're saying that the majority. Let me finish. You're saying the majority of women accuse us of being misogynistic pigs. Yes, that's what you're saying.
Is that not true?
I'm asking if that's what you're saying. Asking me if that's not true. I'm asking you if that's what you're saying.
Exactly what I said.
Okay,
yes.
Then by default, what you would be saying, then by default, what you're saying is the majority of women, since they call us all unduly misogynistic pigs, that they are misandrist. They hate men.
I don't know that that's entirely what I'm saying. I don't think women hate men. I think women play mind games. I think they will say what they want.
I don't know where the conversation's going. I guess I'll just ask you. So is your implication?
You won't let it go anywhere.
I won't let it go anywhere. I don't think I'm the only one that's confused. I think the audience is also confused by this. You seem to be making you're basically making this point. Whoa. Women are fucking old. These women, they say we're misogynist, and so maybe they shouldn't have the right to vote.
No.
That's what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying they should.
Okay, that's why I'm trying to ask specific questions to get to what you're saying. So I'll ask you the specific question and maybe it'll clear. Is your argument because you're saying at the individual level, so many of these women have exhibited that they falsely call men misogynistic pigs, that then on the average we should say because they vote in a way that achieves the goals of that they want in their worldview that's shitty of calling men misogynistic pigs? Are you saying...
You couldn't be more disingenuous about my argument, bro.
I don't know what you're. I guess what we'll do is I'll give you 30 minutes of mumbling. I'm going to sit here and give you 30 minutes to mumble through about how you're very hurt by women, and you're going to go ahead. So the floor is yours. This is excellent programming. So I'm going to leave you explain to the level. I have other callers to get to, but I'm going to leave you have the floor and explain to your heart's content. And then after you go on about it, you can answer the question. So are you saying women shouldn't have the right to vote?
No.
Okay, then what's the point of any of this?
No, I'm saying...
What's the point?
What's the point in any of this? I'm trying to have a meta conversation with you about your debate.
I understand the topic of the debate was should women have the right to vote? I said yes. You shouldn't discriminate based
Right.
on immutable characteristics. You're like, okay, I'm not saying that.
Why
I'm
are
like,
you
great.
so mad?
I'm not mad.
Stop
Why are you so
yelling,
mad?
bro. It's
Dude,
not
you've
necessary.
literally
I
been yelling the whole
can't
time.
tell.
This
I'm
is
not
how I
mad.
talk. Okay, you're not
I
mad.
have
I'm not
been
mad.
yelling.
Yes,
I
you
have
have
not
been.
been
Yes,
yelling.
yes, you have.
I'm
You've been
not,
yelling to the level that I have.
Oh, I really haven't.
Okay, I think you have, and I don't
Oh,
think I've been yelling. So,
maybe.
okay, same with me.
Okay.
Okay, so it seems to me what
So,
you're suggesting,
look,
like you say
Rob.
things like this. You're like, well, if we could say that on average, if we give people the individual right, but we see example after example, on average, the individuals that behave poorly when we're talking about the right to vote. So they vote in poor decisions based on sort of their beliefs that men are misogynistic pigs. Well, then, and I'm getting to the like, oh, okay, what's the well then? Then what's your what are you saying? Because when the topic of the debate was should or should not women have the right to vote, if your ultimate solution is, but I still think women should have the right to vote, I don't understand what the discussion is. Do you just want me to say like, yeah, a lot of women are shit?
I don't know how many of my I don't know how many of my 30 minutes you're gonna step on, bro.
Go for it. All right, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Go. Floor's
look,
yours. Go ahead.
In the context of the debate, okay, which I might add, I agree with you. However, if you can find example of the individual abusing rights to the point where you restrict of their rights, not only restricts the individual, restricts somebody, right? So in terms of annoyance, when we're dealing with children, how much annoyance can you deal with? If you're going to let somebody have the privileges and responsibilities of you expect them to be cleanly and tidy in your house, right? So if women decide to be vindictive and vote against us for no other reason but they think they have the power to do so, how much of an annoyance would you be willing to put up with if you treated them like children and were willing to take them away? Which is exactly the argument that Jim Bob is trying to portray. So, in that context, where I was going from there was you said that sovereignty well, that wasn't your argument, that was his argument. Sovereignty is a responsibility or is equivalent to being able to protect yourself, right? And men have the more ability to do so rather than women. You said that the great equalizer was technology. I asked you if that was a fallacy by the tu quoque, by taking the small example and holding it true for the whole shot, right? I was not accusing you of anything. It was a simple question, direct and to the point. All right. And yeah, women are vindictive, and men, for the most part, are considered the enemy. And this has been the college mantra for years. So I don't know. Maybe I am completely an idiot, and your education and your IQ is so big that I can't just wrap my head around that long-winded blah of words. I don't know, man. I was just trying to ask a couple of questions and get straight to the point. Anyway, I've spoken my piece.
Um, I don't, Mister. What's your name? 6'2".
My name is Dustin Buck.
You know, I
Okay?
don't need
I
your
don't
full
know
name.
how to change my name.
Yeah, that's
on
fine.
this.
Okay, Mr. Buck.
Well, I don't care. I honestly don't give a flying fuck. My name's Dustin Buck.
Okay.
I have a channel by the name of Buck Around and Find Out.
Cool.
Whatever.
All right, I'll answer you with this quote. Mr. Buck, what you've just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I've ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this chat is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. Okay, hey, thanks for calling in. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks and have a great day.
All right, we'll see you. All righty, let's get to the next caller. I don't know who was next, but we'll... Conservative Carnage, what's up, man? How you doing?
Oh, hey, Rob.
How's it going, man?
Hey, I was in the car just a second ago with the guys, and then I was like, oh, I'm pitting the call, but anyway, yeah, I was like, oh shit. But anyway, just wanted, it'll be short, but I sent you a couple pictures. That's my dog. But I meant to say a few months ago when you mentioned your dog had cancer, I felt so bad, and I had sent a voice message, but then it didn't go through, and I'm like, fuck. But yeah, man, my dog passed away from cancer, She was like her baby. She was only like 10, and it was, it's pretty horrible. And she was super smart, blue hiller, and then just a year before that, my other dog had passed away from cancer, the same cancer too. I mean, it's crazy. And then we have one more, but yeah. So I know how you feel.
It's tough. Yeah, it's definitely tough. I've had Annabelle since me and Courtney started dating, like maybe 2-3 months after we started dating. So
Yeah.
it'll be weird when she goes because that's like she's been with me the entire time I've been with my wife. So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. It's like back to back too, like about a year apart. And the one I named him Bane, from The Dark Knight Rises. Yeah, he was a dopey dog. He wasn't like the smartest, but he was still good. But then the other one, Kelsey, she was like a baby, and she was like super smart. And just back to back, like a year apart. Oh, crazy. But yeah, and I just wanted to thank you for yesterday. It meant a lot. And
No
yeah.
problem, man. Yeah, I know everybody goes through tough times. If you missed the show yesterday, we put a link up to a PayPal donations for our friend Conservative Carnage here who's going through some tough times. So, no, I hope it works
yeah,
out for you. And I know it sucks. Like I know I'm lucky, and I haven't had a lot of adversity like that in my life, whether it be health problems or sort of other problems to that level. So I really do wish you well. Now, sometimes it's hard for me to reach out and help people because I'm not really in a good financial position myself.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and it's also difficult because, believe it or not, you get a lot of people that reach out to you. Many times I get people that reach out to me who I've never met and know nothing of. And they'll be like, hey, can you put my GoFundMe up? And I'm like, but what do I know, right? How do I know? But with you, it's different because you've been around long enough. So I figured that, that there was no problem with that. So.
Yeah. No, oh yeah, I would never. I've already said, but like I would never ask you for help. Like, you have a family, man, and like, you work crazy hours. Like it's insane. Like, you're doing awesome, man. I'm so happy for you. But
Thank you.
I
I
just
appreciate
really
it.
appreciate your content, and for years, I've watched and the debates, and it just sucks, all the bad faith lefties, and I'm always arguing with them on Twitter or on X, calling you Rob, Chad GPT, like you're just
Yes.
so bad. So
It
bad
don't bother me.
faith. It's so bad faith, bro. Like you pitted out like exactly. I mean, I know like a week or two ago you pitted out exactly why you what happened like on X, and you made a video response, and they're just so bad faith.
Well, I'm glad you can see it. But yeah, it's it doesn't bother me. That sort of stuff doesn't. There's stuff that bothers me, like anytime people bring into like your wife or your kid, that could be bothersome. Or if like you get your place of employment called. But just in general, I don't give a shit. Like if people just the Rob GPT thing, I think it's just a badge of honor.
Yeah,
It's people they might as well be saying I'm an NPC. That they're NPCs that can't make an argument. So
Exactly, and we can't expect much from him because they argue for abortion, and
right. No, I totally agree.
anybody that argues for abortion are I think horrible people anyway. But
But hey, I'm gonna let you go. I appreciate it. I got a bunch of callers on, but man, it's always appreciated, and I hope that you're feeling better and things go positive. So keep me posted, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Yeah, God bless, man.
All right, we'll see it. Thanks. 629, let's bring you back on. I'm glad you stuck around. You can hear me, 629. Or what? 693. I'm sorry. Shit.
What did I do?
Nothing.
Am I in trouble? Are you
no.
going to spank me again?
No, I was
Are you
reading.
going to call me an idiot?
I was reading a quote from Billy Madison. So here's the problem with what you did. You did exactly what I thought you did. You rambled on. I basically tried to steelman your position for the sake of brevity, and I think that I steelmanned it well. That your argument was basically the majority of women are bad, that they vote in a way that's bad because of their beliefs.
No, that's not what I said. That was in context of
This is why I don't think that this is a worthwhile conversation, because what we're going to do is now go back and forth for 20 minutes on what you said,
well, then why did
which
you
is
come back in here?
well, because I was making a joke reading the Billy Madison thing and then booting you out. But it is going to be worthless to go back and Okay, I want you to tell me. I want you to tell me.
make fun of
I'm going to
me.
turn my hat. Yes, I was making a joke. If you can't handle it, I'm sorry. I'm going to turn my hat backwards, and I'm going to be you, right? And I'm going to try my best to articulate what your argument was. Okay? Now, I want you to keep notes and tell me where I'm wrong. Okay?
I
Right?
don't need to keep notes. I can.
You will need to
remember
keep
what you
notes
said.
because I'm going to explain this, and you're going to say, all of that's wrong. All of it's wrong. And I'm going to say, what part? And then you're going to say, well, I'm saying, and then you're going to repeat everything that you just said. And you won't tell me specifically what I said that was wrong. So I want you to get a pen and paper and write down the parts that you think I'm wrong. Okay?
All right, then go slow and use small words. So I can
will.
keep up.
I will try
Okay.
for you. Okay? All right? You ready? Are you ready?
Hold on,
Okay.
hold on. Action.
Sorry.
No, hold on. I gotta move to the top of the hill real quick. I gotta back in. I'm going to work.
Oh, okay.
You got another idiot with a job here.
Yeah, stupid. Why are you working? Just collect welfare, right?
Right. I should like claim that I'm a female and
Right.
just bite the bullet. I
Right.
could get a check and a disability and it'd be just fine.
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me good enough now that I can go?
I can hear you. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right.
Yes, go ahead. Go
All
ahead
right.
and let her
Here's
rip.
here's your position to the best that I could make it out. You had a conversation with Jim Bob, Rob, about whether or not women should have the right to vote. And you talked specifically about how now they're able to defend themselves because of technology. But the problem is we can see that oftentimes that women have sort of an irrational dislike of men. They think on average as individuals, but when we tally it out on average, they think that men are misogynistic pigs. And so if you take that to the extension, they end up voting in ways, probably somehow based on that belief, that ends up being antagonistic to the interest of men in general. So how long will we tolerate this? And you've already admitted that we could temporarily, or we could restrict people's rights if they lose their rights to do something. So just like with a kid, you don't tolerate their bad behavior at some point. So shouldn't we say with women the tolerating of allowing them to vote when on average they dislike men, that there would be some point where we would say, how long will we tolerate it? Oh, and also I don't think that women shouldn't have the right to vote.
With one exception, that was in context of Jim Bob's argument. You pretty much nailed it.
I'm sorry, with one exception, that was in context of Jim Bob? Can you explain that?
Jim Bob's argument. That was in context of Jim Bob's argument. I was having a meta conversation where I was trying to have a friendly meta conversation with you about your debate and some things that I wanted to ask about. Like, for example, if women in the advent of technology could defend themselves, then does that mean all women with the advent of technology?
But that's
could
not
defend
what you're saying
themselves?
here. That's not what you're saying here. We've already gone through that. I've explained that, right? So what I said there, you agree that was an adequate representation of your opinion?
Yes, I did. I
Okay.
just did
So
twice
then
now.
what I would say is, okay, so when the conversation was, should we revoke women's right to vote? And when your ultimate conclusion is, no, we shouldn't, then ultimately the next step, so you agree with me? Okay, cool. Then the next step is, well, why would we anyways? Because we wouldn't say that we punish everyone in a group because of the actions on that group on average. And then to your
We
question,
do, though.
name it.
Any of the statutes that are based on people breaking laws, like civil crimes become criminal because they cause damage to the individual.
What are you talking
Right?
about? That's not what we're talking about. We don't punish a collective group because of the actions of an individual.
If I was an idiot, right, and I go driving off of a hill and they now have to implement guardrails everywhere, right? I mean, the reality is you're restricting people's rights. And granted, this is the difference between safety versus liberty.
No, those are two different
right?
things.
Now, I have the right to be a moron and drive off a cliff if I want to. All right, that's
Again,
the damn reality. Of it.
okay, putting up safety measures because people in general have accidents is different than arresting an entire group of people because one person in that group took a bad action. So, for example,
okay,
if we
you
said,
couldn't be more bad faith about my example.
what are you
couldn't be
talking
more bad
about?
faith.
My argument is quite simple.
if-
You have the right. Do you think, in general, by default, people should have the right to have a say in the direction their government goes? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Do
so
they
then,
do that,
okay,
though? Does
thank you,
that happen?
thank you,
Hey, no,
thank
if
you,
and I are
thank
being
you.
honest,
I,
though,
you
you
could,
ask the
you're.
question. You
I thought
ask
you
the
were. I
question,
thought you
let me
weren't
ask the
yelling. I thought
question.
you weren't yelling. I thought you weren't yelling.
Okay,
Cool.
I'm not
You answered
yelling.
the question. You answered the question. Now expound upon that. So then it would logically intuit that if I'm saying, okay, women would be included in that group, and just because we could say on average women are misandrist or women think that men are misogynistic pigs and they vote in ways or whatever, I'm not conceding any of this, but let's say for the sake of argument I do concede it. So on average, at least 51% of women believe that way. So as men, how far can we be annoyed before we say enough is enough, and we would be able to take away those rights? And I say,
In context
let me
of Jim
finish.
Bob's
Let me.
argument, that
I don't
makes sense.
understand what the context of Jim Bob's argument is irrelevant because I already explained to you what Jim Bob's argument was and what the debate was there. So we're now talking
Not
about what
irrelevant
you
because
believe.
you
We're
explained
now
something.
talking about what
That
you
doesn't make
believe.
any sense.
We're now talking about what you believe versus what I believe. You've already conceded that you don't think that women should have the right to vote restricted, and I say, well, that
We
further
agree with
makes
each
sense.
other.
I say that further makes sense because what we wouldn't do is punish collectively a group of people for an action or an individual because they belong to a collective that did something. And you're like, well, we put guardrails up if someone drives like a fool.
Dude,
yes, enacting
can
safety
I go
measures.
buy
No,
bus stops
please,
right
I'm going to
now?
leave it. Please, I'm going to keep talking, right? So that's not the same. And when I say, look, there's not like putting up safety measures because someone makes a dumb action isn't the same as saying we say that all white men can't vote or can't drive anymore because 10% of white men have engaged in vehicular accidents. We would
That's
never
not
say
what I
that.
said.
You agree? I know that's not what you said, but I'm putting into context. So then when I further clarify that you say the default position is everyone should have the right to vote, then it would intuit if we don't punish the collective for the actions of the individual, that we would never say that women don't have the right to vote because a large portion of women vote in ways that are poor or that annoy us. We wouldn't punish the individual because they belong to a group as a collective that takes actions that we don't like. Just like we wouldn't punish all men because the actions of a group of men. We wouldn't punish an individual man because on average men do X. We wouldn't punish white people because on average white people do X. We wouldn't punish Muslims because on average Muslims do X. Understand?
Can I own a fully automatic weapon today? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. Is that because of a law?
Yes.
Is that law in restriction of my rights, liberties, and or privileges?
Yes.
Okay. Was that law put in place because of the bad decisions of a few men?
You could say women as well, sure.
Okay, then what are you talking about? We
I'm
punish
talking
people
about
all
that
the
we
time
don't.
For the decisions.
Should we do that?
We do it. That's not the point of whether or not we
should we. Isn't the conversation we are having is should we do these things? Should we revoke women's right to vote?
Well, I don't believe we set parameters for the conversation. I was trying to have a
What are you
specific
talking about?
conversation.
So now
Seems
your
like you
argument
don't
is
want one.
we shouldn't restrict women's right to vote, but practically we should. Because
I
if the
make an
argument is what is, then I'll say okay, women have the right to vote. End of discussion. That's the way it is, and so we're having a question.
I'm happy with that then.
But then we're having a
happy with that
conversation
then.
of what ought to be, right?
Well, no, we're having a meta conversation, or at least I'm trying to have.
I don't
a meta
understand what you're
conversation your
talking
debate.
about. I don't understand what you're talking about. Do you think women ought to have the
then
right to
never
vote?
Mind.
I
What?
don't understand what you're saying. Do you think women ought to have the right to vote?
I've always said women have the right to be an idiot and voice their opinion.
Okay,
in
so
any
they have
way
the right to
think shape,
they
form.
should have the right to vote. Do women have the right to vote?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I don't
So then
know.
your
To be
point
honest with you, in today's- Well,
do
can
you
I answer the
agree?
question?
Do you agree with the fact that you should be allowed to own an automatic weapon?
Absolutely.
Okay, so then I don't understand what the point is. So you're saying your argument isn't women shouldn't have the right to vote. Your argument is men should have the right to own an automatic weapon.
No. See, I'm okay. Look, you're trying to trap me into a contradiction. I'm not contradicting myself. I'm trying to have a meta conversation with you about your debate in context of that debate, which was that Jim Bob said rights are really more like privileges and can be taken away.
That's true. We've
That's
talked about
exactly-
that.
That is exactly the portion of conversation that we're in right now, is why I brought up the fact that we can't own automatic weapons, and this is the fact that I'm being punished based on the decisions of other people.
But
right?
the difference is,
And
I
in
could
all
agree
honesty,
I could agree or disagree with that, but what I'll say is we don't punish a collective subsect based on immutable characteristics then, to get more specific. So it's not like, well,
so it's
not
broadband.
like,
So as long as it's enforced across everybody,
no, I
then
could
it's
disagree
okay.
with it. I could say what ought or ought not to be, but we don't have a situation, and it would be an even worse situation, to restrict people's rights based on immutable characteristics. So in this case, it's not as if we say men can own automatic weapons, but not women. We don't say that. Can you give,
Okay,
like,
and
that
I'm
would
gonna-
be,
I'm
you would
gonna
be
ask
against
you
that.
again. Well, yes, I am against that, but
Cool.
that's not the point. When Jim Bob was making the argument against you, right, he was making it in the framed reference that rights being privileges, meaning that a woman in the house is no more different than a child or adolescent.
Yes, they are. A child can't use a gun. A woman in the house can.
Well, no, but in the context and reference of Jim Bob's argument, right, which is not my argument. I'm not making this argument.
Hey man,
I'm
just
not even-
look. You have to understand. This is circular. I guess just wrap it up. I'm not going to be a dick this time. Wrap it up. I'll give you the last word. I think this is just inane sort of semantic that's not getting us anywhere. Particularly when you're agreeing with me that the
no,
ultimate.
like, look,
It's
I
not
was
moving the
coming-
ball in any direction. I really don't see it. I don't. Maybe I'm dense. Maybe I'm stupid. I just think that this is. I don't think it's moving anywhere. Every time that I push you down, I'm like, but shouldn't it be this way? You're like, yeah. I agree with you, but I'm just saying. So I don't know where this is
No,
getting. So
look,
I'll give you
I
the
was
final
trying
word
to-
here, like a minute. I'm not going
I
to give
don't
you
know how
another
many
6 or
times-
7 minutes, but I'll give you the final word. I just don't understand what you're getting at. It seems to me now you're like, but ultimately you don't. You're just making Andrew Wilson's argument from last night in Tim Pool. Actually, we don't have rights. That's the argument you're making?
No, that's the argument that Jim Bob was making.
Okay,
I don't know
but
how
you're
many
not
times I
agreeing
gotta
with
say
Jim
this,
Bob's
man.
argument. You're just talking about what Jim Bob's argument is, and you agree
No,
with me
I
and
don't
not Jim
agree with
Bob.
Jim Bob's argument. I agree with you, and I saw weaknesses in your argument. I was trying to point.
I
them
don't
out.
think it's. I don't
That's all it was.
think it's a weakness in my argument to not argue things that weren't argued.
Well, I don't think you would think it was a weakness. In
Right.
your
I think
argument.
it's a weakness in your.
understand
I think
that
it's a
was thinking-
weakness. I think it's a weakness in your argument
I'm
that
not
you
making
haven't
an
talked
argument,
about.
so go
I think.
ahead.
I think it's a weakness in your argument to not talk about the importance of a
You
healthy
can
diet.
think whatever you want.
That's right,
You
and
can
so
think
could you.
whatever you want.
That's
dude,
right.
'cause
I guess
I'm
so
not
could
making an
you.
argument.
I guess so could you. It seems to me that I don't understand the utility of the conversation of you saying, but if Jim Bob instead of saying XYZ said ABC, then it could have been a weakness in your argument, which I
No.
haven't even heard what your argument would
see,
be,
that's
that
not
you
even-
didn't address
what-
ABC.
Oh Jesus! I was going to ask you in frame and reference and context if that was the point and the direction that the argument went, what your rebuttal would be, and you said some stupid shit from Adam Sandler. Okay?
I said
No,
because
I
I had
don't care.
answered your position multiple times and you kept saying that's not my position. My answer is we
and
shouldn't
it's
restrict rights based on immutable characteristics. The fact that you're annoyed with the majority of women makes that irrelevant. We shouldn't restrict people's rights because of annoyance.
You keep saying me. Okay, whatever.
What do you mean me? You're making the
You
argument.
couldn't. No, I'm not making the argument. I'm trying to. Well,
Okay,
never mind. You clearly don't-
okay,
you
let me
don't care. You
rephrase.
don't
Let me
care.
rephrase.
I was- it was
Let me
just quick.
rephrase. Let me
How-
rephrase.
how
I'll
would
just
you
mute you.
let
I'll
me
just mute you.
speak?
I'll just
Can
mute
I-
you. I'll
look,
just mute
let me
you.
just-
Okay. You good?
Whatever.
Okay. If a person hypothetically said to me that they were annoyed by women and therefore we should consider whether or not to restrict their right to vote, I would say no. We shouldn't restrict their right to vote because hypothetically some person said to
couldn't
me
be
that they were annoyed by women. Is
More
that better?
disingenuous.
I didn't say
You
me
couldn't
that
be
time.
more
I didn't say
disingenuous.
you that time. I said if a hypothetical person said, should we restrict a woman's right to vote because there is a level of annoyance when we have to restrict, I would say to that person, no, we shouldn't restrict their right to vote because of a level of annoyance. Is that better?
My understanding of if my understanding of a hypothetical person is that hypothetical person is annoyed with a subset or class of individuals that are taking liberties with things that we consider sacred and would like to make actions against such set, then I would agree with that particular phrasing of the argument. Because what my understanding was is that Jim Bob is annoyed with the way that women treat voting, and voting should be treated as sacred and sacrosanct. I agree with him on some of that level. Okay?
So
I
then
don't know
you're-
how else I can explain
So
it to
then
you.
you're
I don't
saying-
know how else-
I-
No,
but
dude,
let's-
listen. I am done. I'm done. I'm gonna
Okay, cool. Say it.
say my closing here.
Uh-huh.
All right, and then I'm gonna be on my way, buddy. I appreciate you. I still like you, right? But the reality is, this was my understanding. I came here to talk to you, to have a meta conversation about your debate, to ask you about certain educational pointers, because I was trying to
I
get
gave you the
into
answer, and then you
the.
said that the answer is not fair because I said you, and that you're not talking about you, but you don't agree about Jim Bob. I'll answer your question again as succinctly as possible. No, I don't think that an annoyance at the rights that people are acting upon because it annoys a specific subsect of people, even if it's a subsect of people I agree with or that I'm involved with or part of, I don't think that mere annoyance is reason to restrict people's rights based on immutable characteristics.
So
You asked me,
why is
had
it
this
there?
been the arguments that Jim Bob was making, I'm interested in what your response would be. And then when I give you that answer, you're like, no, no, no. This is why I don't know what
Because
you're
that's the
asking
same
me.
response. I got the same response in either case, really.
Yes,
So
because
you
my
weren't
fundamental
you weren't
principle
trying to.
holds the
So
same.
you wouldn't change your debate strategy at all. You would keep the same tack, the same
I
tack.
would
This is
answer.
what I was trying to get to. This
What
is
are you
what I was
talking
trying
about?
to get to.
How is that keeping the same tact? There are multiple. I have a
So-
general thesis that we shouldn't restrict people's rights based on immutable characteristics. That's my general thesis, right? Jim Bob comes
understand
with
this.
one answer to that. He's like, we should be able to do so if those immutable characteristics mean that you can't have sovereignty, because if you can't have sovereignty, you can't have liberty. So in order to have sovereignty, you have to have adequate ability to defend yourself. And so the debate becomes about that preposition. Then you're like, but what if Jim Bob would have made a different argument? What if Jim Bob's
Right.
argument would have been that we should have the right to restrict people's rights based on immutable characteristics if that group, on average, as a collective, engages in behavior that the rest of us find to be an
Correct.
annoyance? And so what would you say? And I would say, no, I don't feel the level of a group as a collective rising to the level of as a collective annoyance to the rest of us means that we should have the ability to restrict people's rights based on immutable characteristics on the individual level.
So when it happens to men, you're gonna stand up and fight with men. So when we get our
If they
rights
say
restricted
men
from
don't have the right to vote because
No,
51% of men
no,
are
not
annoying, I will say yes, that's
any
stupid.
of the any of the rights,
Yes.
on the bill of the Constitution.
Yes.
Okay, so
Give me an
okay,
example.
Then, well, I don't have an example. I was just asking. Like, I don't want to be adversarial to you. I just wanted to get some.
But wait, you
clarifying
just asked like that was that you find that shocking? You could literally say any group
No.
that's an immutable characteristic.
No,
Would
but
I
didn't
be
hear you
okay?
say it.
I don't
I
understand.
just
What
wanted
would
to hear you say it. That's all. There's nothing to understand. I wanted to ask a question to clarify. It's for my understanding, not yours.
Okay. So yeah, I don't think we should restrict the right to vote based on immutable characteristic like sex or race.
Copy that. Okay. Well, and I already agreed with that. But what I was wondering is if the context had changed, if he tried a different vector of attack. Apparently, you wouldn't change yours, and
No,
and
I
the
didn't.
strategy would, for the most part, would stay the same.
I don't think annoyance rises to the level of collectively punishing a group based on an immutable characteristic.
Annoyance or nuisance. Okay, like these are legal terms. Like it's not. I'm not coming up with this out of my ass. But whatever. It is what it is.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for
I
calling
was
in.
literally here. I was literally here just for educational purposes.
Well,
I mean, thanks for making fun of me.
Hopefully
and
it was
making worth my time.
entertaining more than education. The Billy Madison shit's funny. You didn't think it's funny?
No, I don't think you were being funny. I think you were.
I apologize.
I don't know what you. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll see.
I hope to talk to you in the future. Have a
All
good
right,
day.
take it easy, man. I don't know. Age is an immutable characteristic. Age is something that changes. When I'm talking about immutable characteristics, I'm talking about something that doesn't have the ability to change. For example, when you're born, it's okay to restrict things based on age because inevitably we could see that there are practicalities that say that people would be able to potentially reach a certain age, such as 18, and therefore we could say there are things that a person before 18 won't have the maturity or the intelligence on average to be able to do. Those sorts of laws are inevitable and justified. However, someone being born a woman and saying, therefore, you will never have the right to vote. Therefore, you will never have the right to exit public unless you're wearing a burqa. Therefore, you will never have the ability to own property. Therefore, you will never have the ability to drive. I think that that is wrong. We shouldn't do those sorts of things. So when I'm talking about the right to vote, that would also apply to all of those others. The right to free speech, the right to the Second Amendment to own a gun. No, I would not be for restricting a person's right to vote because of a mutable characteristic of how they were born, such as their sex. I would not be for restricting their right to own a firearm because of a mutable characteristic like sex. I would not be for restricting their ability to freely assemble or freely speak because of an immutable characteristic like sex. It's not just the right to vote. It would be all of these things that I consider rights. The question of, are rights really rights, or are they just things that are enforced, is a separate conversation. Starship Troopers, I've only seen the movie. I enjoyed it, but I never read the books. All right, next caller. Who do we got here? I don't know who was next, so I apologize. Let's go with Megamax. Is that the guy's name? Megamax. What's up? That sounds familiar. It sounds like from a...
Hey, Rob. What's up, man?
How you doing?
Nothing, but I'm doing all right. It took a while, but we got here.
Sorry. Yeah, I know one of the things is, I guess I could argue with the same person for 5 hours, and I try to remind myself like there's other callers. I kind of thought the last caller was going circular, not necessarily his fault, maybe
a little
my fault,
bit.
But...
I guess if we're going to, just to continue off, the only reason I would restrict the women's right to vote is, one, the 4chan theory of that only high T individuals should be able to vote due to them being truth seekers, not consensus seekers. Unlike, and generally speaking, just in general, women and low T men. And then the other argument could be that...
But there's a problem with it. Joking aside, there's a problem with this. I know, right? So like if I said to you, diversity is our strength. Now, it doesn't matter if you agree with that, right? But if I make that claim, right? What would you prefer then if you're a corporate CEO and you're adhering to that mantra, diversity is our strength? You have two groups to pick from. Group one, white guy who's gay. Then the second person's a black woman from Ethiopia. The third person's Filipino that's in a wheelchair that's nonverbal. Fourth person's a Asian transgender Muslim. You get the picture. All of them different colors, different. That's group one. And group two is a bunch of white men who all vehemently disagree on what the direction the company should go. Which one's more diverse? Oh, and I'm sorry, group one all agree. They all agree on everything.
I would probably have to say there's the left-wing version of that would be the first group.
Right.
The right-wing version of diversity would be the second group.
Right. So the implication of diversity being our strength, it's bullshit. Diversity sometimes could be a strength,
yes,
but sometimes it's a huge detriment. But the idea of when it could be a strength, like this is the metaphor you would hear. Like, you don't want strains of your crops to all be the same strain, right? Because then if a blight comes and affects one ear of corn, it affects all ears of corn. So you want to diversify. That way you don't lose everything, right? Similarly, the reason that diversity could be a strength at some point is because you want people that aren't all in agreement so that you're getting diverse opinions, which you're able to then bounce off each other, and then sort of the cream rises to the top and you have the best answer. So the important part is that diversity of thought, right? That's what we're actually talking about. The superficial, what the left considers diversity, the hypothetical for why you would say, oh, we want a black man, and we want a white woman, and we want a gay person, and we want a trans person. The implication is, the reason that this first was a thought was because people of different backgrounds like that will have different ideas and different perspectives and a diversity of thought. But if they don't, if they all have homogeneity of thought, and they just happen to look...
the shit-lib opinion.
That's right. So it's not...
Useful.
The diversity that people would hypothetically talk about being advantageous is lost. Because it was under the assumption, like, that's the highest value in this particular equation, right? How do we get there? Well, it could be that we get there because you have diverse genetics. It could be because you have diverse education. It could be because you have diverse geographic location. All of these things are potentials that lead to this goal of diversity of thought, right? Similarly, when you're talking about, well, only high T people should go, the high T is just one potential to get to what your ultimate goal is, which is you want truth seekers, right?
Yeah.
You don't want consensus seekers, you want truth seekers. So hypothetically, if there's a way to get there through people other than having high testosterone, that should be allowed. And if there are people with high testosterone that aren't truth seekers, then that shouldn't be allowed. And so,
I understand. I know.
So then it would make more sense to say only people that are truth seekers should be allowed to vote. By the way, I would disagree with this opinion, but I understand. But the question would be, how do you measure
I was
that?
just bringing both the arguments I'm bringing are more just for fun. The other one, though, the second one has more of a leg to stand on, is that women do not have to sign up for the draft, and
That's
I
the best
do
argument.
in order for me to vote.
That's Jim Bob's best argument. That's and
Yeah.
I'll admit that my argument's sort of flimsy on this. The easiest way for me to get out of this argument would be, sure, women should have to sign up for the draft. Okay, end of argument.
To me, that's like that'd probably be enough to get rid of the more problematic, more element of the female vote that everyone online bitches about. Because most of those chicks aren't going to take a risk on that if it's like, oh, though on some level of realpolitik, even if they are signed up for the draft, something tells me that they're still not going to be drafted.
Yeah, I mean, so there's two ways to answer. So I don't adapt that position because I believe that although we should not legally structure things in a way that say that everyone has to accept their predefined sexual role is different. I hate using the word gender role because the left is, right? When I say sexual role, I don't mean, like the act of intercourse. I mean biological sex, right? And I do believe that the way to structure our society predominantly is men are providers, defenders, right? Women are caretakers. The greatest goal, the greatest way to structure our society is for women to be raising families and for men to be providing and defending for families. I believe that. And as such, I think that the role of the military should predominantly be for men. I do think that there are exceptions, that there could be people that don't fit inside that mold. So, for example, I don't think that it should be that women aren't allowed to work and men aren't allowed to be caretakers at home. There are situations with some people, I know people like this, where the woman happens to have a career that makes much more than the man, and so they have a kid, and the man decides...
That was sort of my house, though I think it's more they both made the same or similar enough, but I think my mom actually liked her job, and my dad stayed home. And it's funny, because my mom will freely admit that my father was the better parent.
Yeah.
And he just did a lot of stuff. But it was one of those things that they both negotiated. And part of it, too, is that my mom had a career, not a job.
Correct. Now, having said that, I don't think that that means that we should then, based on that exception, law is one thing. And the way things legally, your dad should be allowed to stay home and your mom should be allowed to work. But culturally, should we push for that to be the norm? Of course not. Yeah. I don't think so. It's very, like, I feel the same. This is going to be unpopular with my audience, but I feel the same about issues of, like, people being gay. I don't think it should be illegal to be gay. But I think it should not be the norm. We should not push it as cultural.
Same here. It should not be illegal to be gay so long as you are gay for the correct reason, which is that you hate women.
Right. Well, there you go. So having said that, so when it comes to the draft, in that framework of, like, understanding, I do believe that the purpose of a draft would be there is an emergency military necessity to have people that would be bare minimal on average of competent fighters, and that's going to be men. And women would be detrimental to that on average in this case of an emergency. So I have no problem with, in that scenario, saying that, yes, men should be the one that would be drafted. Now, can I envision a scenario where things would get so bleak that perhaps you would say, holy shit, like aliens invade or some shit like that, and they're just indiscriminately exterminating everyone, and we're like, look, with the fighting age women, we at least need to draft you to do... Maybe, but I mean, that's so fucking bleak, it's hardly worth mentioning.
I know.
But hypothetically...
In the grim dark of...
the way our laws are set up, should the draft be set up for men? Yes. So then it's like, okay, then the steel man of the argument against me is like, so then based on an immutable characteristic, you basically say that we could restrict man's right to not want to be drafted into a fighting force against his will, but not women's. And that's actually...
not only that, but also tie his right to vote to said draft.
Well, that's what their argument would be. That once you accept that there's a difference in immutable characteristics there, then why can't you accept that should be a reason that men should be able to vote and women shouldn't, right? Yeah. But there are several arguments to one. One, because I think...
there's the realpolitik of it, of just you need men for the draft, sort of
Well,
thing.
yes, but when you're talking about things that need to happen in an emergency, that's different than how the day-to-day activities of the country should go. For example, you could also say in times of an emergency, you restrict everyone's right to vote. If we're in World War III, and hypothetically, if China drops a nuclear bomb over Los Angeles tomorrow, there is a scenario where
That's
it might
not
be
a war move.
Well, but you see,
Sorry.
there is a scenario where we might not have an election. And
Yeah,
people
I
might
understand
gnash their
that.
teeth and whine, but you would say, I could see as a government why you would say, holy shit, we
Yeah.
don't have time for this right now. We're fighting for our lives. So that's
Yeah.
the difference of an emergency versus the way things normally should be. My premise is very simple, that I think that we shouldn't be able for immutable characteristics to take like the fundamental right of people should have some sort of voice in their government and how their government's ran. No taxation without representation, right? When it comes to the ability of defining that only on the idea of force and defense, I think that my position with Jim Bob was I was talking about women's ability to defend themselves, and then I differentiated why the draft was sort of an emergency situation.
Yeah.
However, my ultimate answer is I think it's erroneous, and it doesn't really get to the debate with Jim Bob. I think it's an erroneous position to tie your right to vote based on your right to fight. I think that's erroneous. I think that the reason that you should have right to have input in your government is because you are forced to be part of that government and to abide by the laws of it and to pay into it. And therefore, no taxation without representation.
Yeah.
If you have to pay sales tax, if you're a woman and you work, and we agree that you should have the right to work, and you have income tax, then you should have a
Yes,
say
I
in how the
understand
government
it all.
goes. That's
I'll get
that's
on to
ultimately
the-
my position.
I'll get on to my actual point that I wanted to bring up, which is that Republicans need to actually understand power and how power works. And more of just that. I come from the school. This is a smaller YouTuber who's sort of gone away now to live his life. He's basically checked off YouTube and being a political pundit. Good old Louis Laval, the pastor, the five take, can't say that word on YouTube.
Yeah.
But it's just like the recognizing that when you have the power, and if someone, example is like, you are going to go and do something, whatever it is. Like, let's say you wanted to mount a big cross on your front lawn, and one of your douchebag neighbors who's an atheist comes along and says, "Oh, you can't do it," but then you do it anyway, and nothing happens to you. Did you have the power to do it?
No. Right?
Well, you did. have
Oh,
the power
wait.
to-
Restate it. Restate it. Maybe I
All right.
misunderstood what you said.
You wish to put a big giant Christian cross on your front yard. One of your asshole neighbors who's an atheist comes along and says to you, "You can't do that. That blah 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 is all these reasons." But then you go and do it anyway, and nothing happens. Did you have the power to put that?
Yeah, you did because nothing happened.
yes.
You did it.
Yes,
It happened.
And it's one of those things of just because someone says, "Oh, you can't do that," but if you just do it anyway, and nothing happens to you, then you have the actual power to do it. And so
that's true.
It's one of
And-
those things of Republicans get too caught on the idea of listening to the Democrats when they say you can't do that, even when it's clearly obviously BS. Like, part of the thing that disabled Trump during his first administration was getting too tied up into the courts. Whenever someone would come along and, like, one of those activist left-wing judges would just throw up a BS reasoning for why, oh, you can't do this with the border wall, even though you allocate funds like from the DHS or whatever, that is discretionary income that the president can use for whatever he wants, and he activates via this process. He can do it. It's all within the law, letter of the law, but now we're getting stuck in the courts because some jerk-off activist judge says no. What Trump should have done in those cases where, like, it's an obvious judge abusing his powers, just do it anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
judge can't
right.
unbuild
So I
the
forget
wall.
who it was. Was it Franklin Roosevelt? I think I could be wrong, but it was a Democratic president that was discussing something, and they were like, "But the courts will overrule it," and he's like, "And how will they enforce it? So,
what is their arm?
Do they have a
And
military?
that sort of thing.
No, they don't. So I'll do what I want." Right. So there's two things to say about this. That's different than the question of what ought to be. Yes, it's technically true that you could do whatever the fuck you want if you have the guns and the other people can't stop you.
Yeah.
But what we're saying when we're crafting a constitution or discussing the way a government should run is we're trying to make a government operate in a way that will take away the idea that the biggest gun wins, right? That we all come together mutually as a collective and agree these are the predefined rules, and so it won't just be the person with the biggest gun. And the way we define that is all of the people with guns basically tacitly agree we won't turn our guns against each other as long as things are done in these predefined parameters. Because the idea is to stop sort of a system where, well, whoever could have the most guys with guns gets to do whatever the hell they want. If they think that they could come in and have, did you ever watch the movie Braveheart, right? Like the idea of prima nocta. Oh, well, we're going to say that when you get married, we have the first night with your wife, right?
Yeah.
How do we avoid that shit? Well, they got the most swords, they got the most guns, so tough shit. You're going to deal with it. And we said, look, if we have to come together as a collective, like, how do we avoid that? Just like a government basically being whoever has the most guns runs things in the area. And so we said, all of us that have guns, or all of us that are supporting the ability to have guns and to have force, will say, as long as things happen in this predefined. So what ought that to be? Now, the way it plays out is, sure, like, you see this with agencies all the time. Like, the best example is like the FBI. Constantly, the FBI is just like, oh, our bad. Yeah, we did that. That was technically illegal. And what's the consequences?
But we did it
We'll change it. We promise we won't do it again. And then they do it again and like, our bad. And it's just like, what are you going to do about it? And if it might be on paper illegal, but if there's no consequences, or you can even take it further to that, like in a bipartisan way, insider trading in Congress. We all know it happens, but no, there's never any consequences, right? And so my big thing that I focus on practically is that double standard and how the consequences are applied.
Yeah.
That, to me, is what has the ability to tip our government to the point of corruption that it becomes unrecognizable and unsalvageable. Even if there are things that I don't like I don't particularly like foreigners influencing our elections. But if we're going to allow it for one side, we have to allow it for the other. And if we're going to say, no, we don't allow it for one side, then we have to disallow it for the other. When the laws only apply to one side, then you, in effect, have a tyranny.
Two-tier kier.
Yes. Now, the question is, is the answer to that, there's two potential answers to that. To try to win within the bounds of the system, so that we can hold people that have broken the rules of the system accountable, which is what I'm trying to do. And then there are the people that say, there's people that say, we tried that game, it didn't work, now fuck it, we use the same tactics as them. They want to erroneously spy on us. We'll have a bunch of Republican attorney generals say, fuck it, we're going to erroneously spy on you. They want to bring erroneous court cases against Trump with an attorney general in New York who basically run on a promise of, I'm going to get Trump. Then fuck it, we'll do it in Arkansas when it comes to the Harris, Biden,
or the
Clinton.
Clintons.
And so there is certain levels of that. I agree that you need to fight fire with fire. But at the end of the day, as an individual, are you willing to sacrifice who you are and what you stand for some sort of political freedom or some sort of political victory now? It's a difficult philosophical question. To some degree, I think the answer is yes. Like if it came between you or your family going to a concentration camp, then the answer seems yes.
Yeah,
but if it comes between Donald Trump winning versus Kamala Harris, maybe the answer is no. Right? And you have to be careful. And again, oftentimes the devil's in the details. Should you, let's say you think that there's voter fraud that occurs that helps the Democrats. Probably is, right?
Yeah.
Would we recommend that Republicans commit voter fraud to help them? Of course not. Of course I would. Right? But if they're if they have court cases.
It's one of those things of we need to have a certain level of standards. Like it's one of those things of, if we must destroy the enemy, all right, we will destroy the enemy. But the enemy is like child rapists, and we're not going to rape children, guys. That's the one line we'll not cross, sort of thing. It's like we certainly do have to have standards, but we do have to actually fight to win.
Yeah. So I mean, it's difficult, and oftentimes you have to look at it situation by situation. And I've admitted I don't have the stomach for it. Right?
Yeah.
Take this to like what's the word I want to use? A low stakes version of this. After the assassination attempt, there was the first one, which is ridiculous, we have to say. But remember there was this viral video of this woman that worked at Home Depot, this just like little mousy old lady, and this dude's like, you fucking posted on Facebook that you wish that shooter would have better aim, fuck you, blah, 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 blah. And she's screaming at this lady, and it goes viral, and she gets fired. Did she deserve to get fired? Probably. Would I have done that?
It's one of those things too of like, if it was anyone else on our side and that shit happened, would they have been fired?
That's all true.
And
but
would anyone on their side be asking that question of
also all true,
fired?
but irrelevant to the point that I'm making, which is probably right, which justifies firing her. But would I do it? Would I be the guy there with the camera doing it? Would I be the one on my social media like, this lady needs to get fired? No, I wouldn't be. And that's probably why I'm not the leader that our side needs. Because in the end, I will lose. That's the truth. That's the black pill that I'm at. The truth is that people like me that are saying, like, no, we shouldn't just default to who has the bigger guns. We need to continue to embrace this idea that it is possible for us to live together and that there are predefined rules that we've all agreed on that we have to follow reasonably within those parameters. I'm going to lose. Because what happens is if one side operates under that and the other side says we are going to cheat and fucking steal and be ruthless and treat you like the enemy in every possible chance, when you run like the game scenario of those two sides competing over and over, inevitably the side that's willing to do anything will win. And so the only pushback to that is the other side saying, now we too are willing to do anything. And so I'm trying real fucking hard to prevent that from happening. I am. But I'm going to lose. I know that I'm going to lose because it falls on deaf ears. No one gives a shit. So,
well, one of the things I've noticed of just Republicans recognizing the power they had, it's like, all right, the squad member, I think it was Linda Sarsour, the one from Somalia. I think that's the correct one.
Linda.
Maybe I'm thinking, no, it's not
Linda Sarsour is not in.
It's Ilhan Omar. There we go. That's who it was I was thinking of. During the Trump administration, it's like we were in control of the government. How do we get her out of office? We're definitely not going to be able to vote her out because she has her own constituents that, besides just the racial and religious advantage that she would have with said constituency of Somali immigrants and such, just in general on policy, they probably agree with her. So how would we be able to remove her from office? Well, we know for certain it's basically an open fact that she committed a immigration fraud by marrying her brother and stuff. Mm-hmm. Recognizing this fact, revoke her citizenship and deport her ass back to Somalia.
Yeah, but how do you do that? You have to have the people in office that are willing to do that. And how do you get those people? Through voting. I wouldn't be in favor of taking action outside the scope of that. Like, I have no problem with using the laws that are on the book and enforce them. That's perfectly fine.
Well, that's
but the question is if we don't have people that are willing to do
don't do that.
Right. So
the way we need to get people that will have the stomach to do that sort of thing.
Well, the problem is, but how do you get
her would be rude. And
I'm sorry if I'm trying to rush it along. I got like 4 more people.
No, I understand. As part of it is just getting actual people in there. We need the Trumps, but we also need the commissars that will.
That's why.
Go out and
but you have to understand because the extension of what you're saying is this, right? I'm not saying you're saying this, but the logical extension would be this. Sometimes the tree of liberty has to be refreshed with the blood of tyrants. Right, which is what you hear people say. Voting's not working anymore. So, and by the way, the left says this. Supreme Court's corrupt. Trump's God, Emperor, King now. So, right, that's their argument. So, we can't trust the system anymore because the system's corrupt. And Trump's evil, Nazi, Hitler, God, King. So, right? And that's why 28% are saying we'd be better off if Trump got assassinated. Right? So, I don't agree with that. I think that's like dangerous. So, for me, the battle is fought through information. I have to convince enough people that we need to elect people that will remove people like Ilhan Omar. And if I can't do that, then I lose. And it is not justified for me to then say, okay, that didn't work. Now I'll go beyond that. I do not think that's justified. I think that what I could do is double down and try to get more effective in my persuasion and try to convince more people and try to tailor my message better. And I might lose again. But I think the alternative is guaranteed to be worse. That if both sides say, fuck that, grab our muskets, that's a very dark place. And so I think that like there are other things you could do that don't enter that scope. Like you just say, fuck it. We just balkanize. We all move to the same states and we try to finally elect people that represent our interests, that will keep the evils of Ilhan Omar and how she votes away from our doorstep as much as possible. But I cannot defend the right to go extra constitutionally out there and advocate the most harsh of sentences on someone like Ilhan Omar because I think she has disastrous policies. So for me, the battle is fought through information. And that's how we have to fight it. We have to fight it through persuasion. We win by letting people know the truth. They win by censoring the truth. And to me, that's the battle. That's why I've spent so much time advocating against the idea of using any sort of political violence, morally for either side, but definitely strategically for our side. Because anytime that you use any sort of violence, or even the suggestion of we have to go outside the scope of the legally defined parameters, what occurs is that's used as a huge propaganda victory for the other side, who then uses that as an example to use their authority to crack down on you, which is exactly what January 6th ended up being. Now, I think January 6th was set up a lot by them, and it's certainly been blown out of... Yeah.
So definitely set up.
And it's been blown out of proportion. But... it's a huge propaganda victory for them, because what happened was we were winning the propaganda battle that the left and the people that vote Democrat and bootlick the establishment were ultimately the violent ones. And there's a bunch of people that we need to convince that are sort of not firmly on either side that we're seeing it. They could lie as much as they wanted about the riots of George Floyd, but people were seeing it. But the problem is after January 6th, people were like, it's a wash. It's a wash. The right's violent too.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
and
I
so
think
that's
part
the
of it,
propaganda
too, is
victory
I
that
think,
they've...
Yeah, well, I guess the only way to like get them to realize, if you guys thought that that was right-wing violence on January 6th, it's like, I don't think you guys recognize what actual right-wing violence is. If right-wing, if the people there at January 6th were actually there to do violence, it would have there would have been a lot higher of a body count.
Well, maybe. I think that they could be there to do low-level violence, but if they wanted to go all out, you're certainly right. But hey, thanks for the call. I got a couple more people to get to, and I definitely need to be done by 11:30. So thanks so much, Megamax. Call back, man. Thank you.
I will. Have a nice night.
Yep, you too. One more thing I'll say. Appreciate that call. But again, I think the most important argument on the 19th Amendment stuff is this. I cannot think of a more detrimental argument at this point in this crucial time, where I think that these sorts of elections that we have right now and cultural battles that we have right now are so important, than telling half the people that, regardless if you like it or not, have a say in things as the system is now, we want to take away your right to have a voice in that system. I think it is an incredible fucking blunder. Incredible. You might as well be running on, we want to lock everyone over the age of 40 in prison. And it's like, you'd be shocked when it's like, oh shit, we're not winning on that? It's so fucking dumb. I will have that conversation with people because I understand, and I just think it's such a dumb, the idea that women should be able to vote is so out there, and I'll treat it with the respect because the people that are coming at me with this position are people I respect, like Jim Bob, like Andrew, like Rachel, like Hosbar that was in there. I respect these people, so I'll treat that with respect, but deep down I feel it's a really fucking stupid position, and all it does is get us pigeonholed as people that... I even asked Jim Bob, and I think Andrew specifically, when I said, if I could articulate you a future 100 years from now where culture's changed so much that actually it's only men voting and they're voting in progressive ideology, and if we allowed women to vote, then it would be more conservative ideology. Would you allow women to vote then? And they're like, yes. The idea that we just say, fuck it, we have our agenda, and whatever it takes to make sure that the only people that have a voice are the people that will make sure our agenda gets pushed through, I think that that will correctly be used to smear people, and it will cause them immense harm in convincing the people that they need to convince to adapt the positions they need to adapt to drag the country in a more correct direction. So I can't tell you, it's so funny, and I know that no one gives a shit. I know that the Crucible people don't give a shit. I know Rachel and Andrew and Haas and 693 or whatever they called it. I know none of them, Jim Bob, they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit about this. I can tell you right now that I've had 4 or 5 people that are right-wing, including one of my doctors who watched the first video ever watched me. Super fucking Trump guy, super MAGA. He was like, dude, I tuned in and you're talking to these psychopaths that want to take away women's right to vote? That's not true, Akir. That might be what you say, but that's not what Andrew Wilson said. I was the one talking the moral position. Andrew admitted that he would have the utilitarian position. So maybe you are Akir. I'm just saying, and you might say, but it doesn't matter. We should be allowed to talk about this. I agree. You should be allowed to talk about it. I would never deign to censor you. But I'm telling you, The vast majority of people are like, what the fuck? We're 50 days from the election and you're arguing with people on your own side that all women should not have the right to vote. Yep, that's what I'm doing. Then I'm taking a call-in show, and what are we talking about? Should women have the right to vote? I'm not blaming any of the callers. The whole point of this show is to talk about what you want. We could be talking about Iran trying to help the Harris administration. We could be talking about the guy that testified today that showed that he was all the terrorists that are coming through the southern border, and he was told to shut up about it. We could be talking about the fact that the Hunter Biden sentencing has been delayed to all but ensure a pardon because it'll be after the election at this point. We could be talking about the assassination attempts on Trump, but we're talking about why women shouldn't have the right to vote. And if you can't see why that is a logistical, practical nightmare 50 days before an election, and why the Democrats win so much because they control the narrative so much, I don't know what else to say. So I know that I probably shouldn't bring that up again because it pisses people off, because people are like, well, so you're saying that there are things that we shouldn't say. I'm saying that you have to be strategic in how you approach things. And so I vehemently disagree with the idea that women shouldn't have the right to vote. But if your strategy is to make this a central talking point that we're hyper-focused on 40 to 50 days before an election, where you're going to need an awful lot of women to vote the way you want, to have the country go from a disastrous position to a less disastrous position, you're making a huge strategic mistake. So, just saying. All right, Pinkerton. We're going to have to try to keep 10-minute maximum here because I do want to try to get to as many people as possible, but I can't be up all night. I'd love to watch a movie with my wife tonight, for real. So, what's up, Pinkerton? Nice to hear from you. Can you hear me? Pinkerton. You might be muted.
Hello, Rob.
Oh, there you are. There you are. What's up, man?
How you doing today, man?
Good, doing good. What's happening?
Not much. I didn't see a particular topic. What's on the agenda today?
Whatever you want to talk about, man.
Struggling to think now. I've just been in a long conversation with the people in the chat.
You want to talk
Current
about
state of what?
Women's right to vote? Is that what you want to talk about?
I saw that's what you're talking about with everyone else.
Yeah,
but,
you talk about what you want. That's what you want. I've talked about why I think it's a strategic blunder. So much so that when I did the 19th Amendment debate, all these lefties that I crush and debate all the time, you know what they did? They were putting up on Reddit and putting up on X, look at Rob debating the important issues, should women have the right to vote? Ha ha ha! Because they know it's a huge PR victory. It doesn't matter that I'm ultimately arguing for the side that they would agree with. When I'm out there trying to convince sort of people that haven't made up their mind or people that are on the fence that they should go vote for Donald Trump, they're going to be hearing the message, oh, Rob's debating the important shit, like should women have the right to vote? It makes it more difficult for people like me, so maybe I'm just selfish. But whatever you want to talk about, man.
Yeah, I mean, current state of affairs in the U.S. Any thoughts changed on like Trump's chances of winning, or still think he's got 5% chance?
I'd still say 5 to 7% chance. Look, he's going to have to win state. Now it seems like North Carolina is going to be harmed because the person that he supported is now embroiled in a scandal. You will be shocked at the scandals that come, not just with Trump, but with Republicans around this country that have been sat on. I think that the 2020 election illustrated, regardless if you think it was shenanigans, or illegal shenanigans, or just moral shenanigans, I think it illustrated that our narrative is set by people that have such a near total control on that narrative that they could drag basically a dementia patient like Joe Biden across the finish line. And now Kamala Harris is hiding in a basement more than Joe Biden was. So after the 2020 election, one of the things I said was, I don't mind people talking about Dominion voting machines and this, that's fine. All that shit should be talked about. But my question was, what if it wasn't stolen like that? What if Google manipulating an algorithm and the intel community going all in, and academia and the entertainment industry and the legacy media and the people that are running the majority of social media are able to convince a plurality of people that even a walking corpse like Joe Biden should be president? What does that mean for the future of our country? And now we've taken it to the next step. It's not a dementia patient, but it's even more of an empty suit than a dementia patient in Kamala Harris, who has no positions herself, who will completely 180 on any position she has in any amount of time, who is so incompetent that she basically has to be hidden from the press, which is going to be on her side anyways. And I think there's a solid chance that they're strong enough to drag her across the finish line. I think that the level of control that these people have in our establishment institutions is so severe that it basically makes it a near miracle chance that Donald Trump will be able to win. So, yeah, none of that's changed of anything I've seen. And I was laughed at after the first assassination of Trump. Everyone was like, that's it, election over. That this will be the main story going forward now they tried to kill Trump. No one gives a fuck. No one. They successfully controlled the narrative and moved on. So much to the point we had a second assassination attempt. 3 days later, we're talking about women's right to vote. No one gives a shit. So, I mean, that just goes to show you the power that they have to craft that narrative. And I think it's going to be very difficult to overcome that. And that's before we even get to things like ballot harvesting and other such things that there could be all sorts of problems with. So,
but that's mainstream media that are sort of doing that. I mean, not too many people are, as they used to be, are paying attention to the mainstream media, and it is the left that are. Well, I don't know if it's left, but
what are they paying attention to? If not the mainstream media, what are they paying attention to? Give me an example of someone they might be listening to. Who do you listen to? How about that?
I listen to you.
What was I talking about today? Women's right to vote. People listen to Andrew Wilson, and what was Andrew Wilson talking about? Women's right to vote. You see the point? It's not just the mainstream media. It's that even the, quote, alternative media follows the cues of the narrative that's set forth by these institutions, including the mainstream media. We're always reacting to the stories that they're pushing out. So we're reacting to Mark Robinson in North Carolina. We're reacting to all sorts of stories that aren't the assassination attempt, that aren't the economic woes that came about. We are victims of the current narrative, myself included. I'm not saying I'm better than people. I'm fucking worse than people. I'm worse because I know it and I still fall into the trap. So that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, you're right. I think less people are tuning into CNN than maybe were 20 years ago to get their news. But CNN's the one doing the interviews of J.D. Vance and doing the interviews, limited though they are, of Walz or Harris, which results in a story that people like me then end up talking about. So they're able to control the narrative in that way. That's why we were running defense on J.D. Vance is weird. That was 3 weeks after a fucking assassination attempt on Trump. And the predominant story in this country was, is J.D. Vance weird? No, we don't think he's weird. And the Democrats like, yes, he's weird. That's why when I'm doing debates, here's the topics I'm debating normally. January 6th. You think that's a win for Trump? No. I'm debating.
But then why are you doing it though, Rob?
Because I am doing this predominantly for my own entertainment. And that's one of the things that people want to see me do. That's why but look, real quick, that's why I've said I'm not taking any more January 6th debates. That's why when you saw me on that panel the other night, last Friday, I was like, bam, I'm hammering these points home over and over. I'm not going to take the bait. That's why I criticized Gibbs for taking the bait. But having a debate about women's right to vote was different because I like Jim Bob, and I like Andrew Wilson, and I like Rachel Wilson, and I like The Crucible. So I will acquiesce to their request on that specific topic because I think it's important to them, and they have the right to have someone who disagrees with them treat that argument seriously and debate it in a competent way. I think that they've earned that right because they're great people. I just disagree with the strategy of doing it, particularly now. But I will acquiesce to it because they're my friends. That's why. I just think it's a mistake. That's all I'm saying.
So if you think it's a mistake, I get that, you think, they're respectable and they're good and stuff, but if you think it doesn't help the cause of Trump and Republicans for this election cycle, why not say, I'll discuss that debate after the election?
Well, I could have, but I think that'd be a little rude to your friend. Better argument that our Cure Oak makes there, which is a totally valid criticism of me. Then why did I spend a day or two talking about thinking Trump lost the election or lost the debate? Well, because I did think he lost the debate, and ultimately, my
still on that
reason.
Oh my God.
Well, listen, I'm answering this question. Ultimately, my reason for doing a show is for my own entertainment and for me being authentic, and that's a topic that came up, and I still talk about topics that aren't exclusively designed to help Trump win. I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to get into the mode where it's like, okay, I'm all in on trying to get Trump to win, and I hopefully hit that running here in the next week or two. But yeah, I wasn't going to lie. People were going to ask, who do you think won the debate? And I can't lie. I'm not going to sacrifice my own integrity, so I gave my honest answer. I also said I thought he lost, and by lost, I think that to me and the way I evaluate the debate, he lost. But it could be proven that ultimately, by the time we get to people voting, that it either won't matter, which is basically what I predict, or that it actually ends up helping him in some way because Kamala Harris didn't define who she was to a bunch of people that she needed to. But still, I would say Trump lost that debate. I think that that's just my objective assessment of it. And particularly, I have to be honest because I'm a debate judge. So it'd be really bad form if people can't trust me as an objective debate judge because they know I'm willing to lie for my side to help them win an election. Then what the fuck good am I, right?
Yeah, that's a fair point, but I still don't think like
Tristan said, real quick, Tristan says, so how aren't we being authentic by talking about how we want women to vote so we don't sacrifice our integrity, Rob? Who says you're not being authentic? You're absolutely being authentic, which is, do you think for a second I think that Andrew Wilson or Jim Bob aren't being authentic? Of course they're being authentic. Absolutely. It's a huge strategic blunder. And it's a different threshold of me saying, I think Trump lost the debate, but he clearly is the preferred candidate for XYZ, than telling half the electorate, none of you should have the right to vote. But by the way, this election, vote for our party so that hopefully we could get to the point where we take away your ability to vote. I think that that's mountains apart from sort of taking your eye off the ball. I hope that answers.
Mark, continue now, yeah?
What's that?
We're still going... Yeah, I was just... we still react to the super chat, or can we continue?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just saw that and thought it was important. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. Yeah, so I'm still struggling to understand how... The reason I think you were talking about the debate so much is because you're seeing so many people sort of, not just disagree with you, but when I was listening to you talk about that, you kept saying, not everything, but you kept saying a few things that Trump didn't do that he actually did do. And you keep saying that Trump lost the debate, but you say that though, but would Trump have lost the debate if the moderators had fact-checked Kamala Harris? I don't think he would have won.
He probably still would have lost. Or better question, if they wouldn't have fact-checked either side.
He still would have lost?
Yeah, if they wouldn't have, let me finish. Yes, you could also you could always envision a scenario had the moderators helped Trump more than they helped Kamala Harris, would he have won? Theoretically, yes. Had they not helped either side, he would have still lost. In fact, if I was Kamala Harris, I'd be a little pissed that they weighed in so much because Trump took the bait. She had him dangling by a string the entire debate because instead of focusing on the disastrous policies of the Harris-Biden administration, focusing on how he's appealing to voters like RFK voters and the vision of what he was going to have and how great it was, he was talking about whatever she wanted him to talk about. Crowd size, him talking about her race, etc., etc. He did poorly. Give me an example. Like you said that I kept saying he didn't do things, but that he actually did. Can you give me one example of when I said Trump didn't do this? If Trump would have did this, it would have been better, but he actually did that?
Okay, so just let me have about 10 seconds to have a think about that.
I can tell you what I think you're going to say, right? You're going to say...
Well, let me say it first, because you've been... So... You said that, Trump stated certain points that you said he didn't state, and one of those would be in terms of the, nothing's coming to me now, it's just making me look really dumb.
No, you're not looking dumb at all. I don't disagree with you, right? But what I'm going to say is I didn't say he didn't say those things. So hypothetically, you'd say this, like I should have said, Trump should have focused on the fact that Kamala Harris said she was going to ban fracking. Right? And you'll say, but he did say that. He did, which is true. He did say that. The problem is, this is how Trump would say that. Well, Kamala said that my crowd sizes aren't big, and my crowd sizes are huge. They're the best crowd sizes. Everybody says they're the best. No one leaves early. My crowd sizes are amazing, and everyone likes them. Our rallies are great, and people come because they love America and they love me. When it comes to crowd size, everyone admits they're the best crowd sizes they've ever seen. They're fantastic. Kamala wants to ban fracking. And these crowd sizes are amazing. They're just absolutely fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, he said the words, Kamala wants to ban fracking.
Yeah.
The problem is that you're evaluating what people do that have already had their minds made up is they're finding any excuse. They're like, they got this checklist. Oh, yep, he said the words. There we go. But you have to convince people that haven't made up their mind. Or you have to inspire people that maybe agree with you, but that were unlikely to go vote. So you have to drive out your base. Did Trump's focus accomplish the things that needed to be done on his side? No, they didn't. Him just checking the box, saying at the end of a 2-minute screed where he's rambling and meandering the literal 2 or 3 seconds that he technically needed to say, isn't doing it. The closest he came was in his closing statement, which was pretty good. It could have been better, but it was pretty good, where he makes the salient point that should have been the central thesis throughout the whole debate, which was, then why didn't you do it? You've been there. And he doesn't really get that point hammered home. And people, I'm looking at the debate through the criteria of, I'm trying to look at it through the lens of, I'm an undecided voter. Who do I think came off better? Who accomplished the goals they needed to? Kamala Harris fails in accomplishing her goals. She needed to explain exactly who she is because she's hidden basically from the media and from the people. She doesn't do that. But Trump does a worse job. Trump needed to define who Kamala Harris was and come off as someone who's not unhinged and stable. He did not. He didn't do that. And I think he did a poorer job than Kamala Harris.
Okay, I will absolutely concede on your point that Trump said the words, but not in a good way at all.
Right.
I'm still. I mean, we're not going to agree on this, and I don't want to keep going back and forth because I know you've been going back and forth with everybody for the last few days on this. I just think if the moderators, and we can talk about this all day, but last thing I'll say about that is if the moderators had fact-checked Kamala would have been a bumbling mess, and it would have looked like, I think it would have looked like an easy win for Trump because
Maybe
Kamala did not.
That could have been true. That may be true, right? I'm saying if the moderators would have completely stayed out of it, Kamala probably still would have won because even before, I even tweeted like 20 minutes into it, I thought the moderators were doing basically good enough in the first 20 minutes or so. Then as soon as they started with the first fact check, it got ridiculous. It went downhill. The first two topics, even though I thought that they were worded more favorably to Kamala Harris than Trump, so like they'd ask Kamala Harris, hey, you seem to change your position. Care to elaborate? And then they'd just leave her talk. Then they'd be like, Trump, experts say that your tariff policy would in effect be a 10%.
Yeah.
Like, so the way they're wording the specifics of it's designed to make it seem like there's these official people that say Trump's policies are worse than Kamala's, but overall, that's a minor quibble. They had the topics. Two of the first three topics were the most important topics for Trump, the economy, immigration, and he dropped the ball instead of hammering the ball and spiking it. And so the moderators just stood back. And then everything was backloaded. Almost all the questions afterwards were designed to harm Trump and to help Kamala, and they started jumping in. I thought Kamala was winning the debate before the moderators started to jump in. That's just my honest assessment. Now, my bias is actually the opposite bias of what people would think. If I had to say where I could be wrong, it could be that because I'm a debater and because I agree with Trump, I'm coming up with arguments in my head that I think are really good, and because Trump's not making them, my bias is to say that Trump's losing. And that could be true, but I think that I've tried to the best of my ability to explain exactly why I think that she was winning optically. The fact that the moderators jump in, if you don't take into account that the moderators were cheating for her, yeah, it makes it look like a bigger win for Kamala Harris, but that's not how most people are going to evaluate it. Most people are going to correctly see, look, the moderators put their thumb on the scale, and it could have been different. That's true. It could have been different, but then again, you still have to blame Trump for a lot of this. Did you know that ABC's moderators would be biased?
Absolutely.
So did I. Do you think Trump knew it?
Oh, yeah.
Then why did he drop the ball so bad?
Well, because you could. I mean, you can't do anything. So I guess I blame Trump for even taking the debate. Like, I don't. That pisses me off that, CNN and ABC shit on him for like 8 years with a bunch of bullshit.
He should. You're absolutely correct. He should not have taken
the
debate.
And then he hands them, here's an olive branch, here's a CNN town hall, here's a boost to your ratings. I don't agree with that shit.
Yep, I agree. Hey, I got to let you go. I got to get to more people. I want to be done by 11:30, but thank you so much, Pinkerton, for calling in.
No problem. Take care, man.
Take care. Thanks. Sorry for rushing people along. Try my best to get to everyone. Let's get to Chrysco. Chrysco, what's happening, my friend?
Hello there.
Hello. Fishing?
No.
Oh, jeez. So what's happening?
I am just going to mute YouTube. There we go. Yeah, so you've had some interesting topics that I've not paid attention to as I've been talking in chat. One thing I would want to say is, maybe one of your moderators could write down who entered the chat first.
Oh, yeah, it's not a bad idea. The problem is I never know which moderators will be on, but yeah, that's not a bad idea. It's very difficult. It's just the boomer in me. Yeah, I'll write that down as a possible suggestion. I think that maybe that's not a bad idea. Maybe I'll ask a volunteer to be in a moderator and just sit in the room there while it's going on, and then they could tell me. I'd say, okay, Dustin Buck, who's next? Right? And they could give me. So that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I normally see a moderator at least in YouTube. I don't care about Twitch chat, even though that's the only place I can talk now.
Yeah, what'd you do on YouTube?
I don't know. Like, I can talk in some people's chats and some people's I can't. It's very weird. But anyways. So, I know Ohio, Springfield has been a big thing and now Trump's going. But when I look at that, it's very reminiscent of things that are happening here in Canada. Except not as extreme. You may get more illegals, but Canada is flooded with legal immigration.
Yeah.
So much to the point that immigration here is basically nobody wants more. They all want significantly less. In fact, like, we bring in close to America's legal immigration in Canada.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, like,
well, it's to the point, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I read this the other day. It's to the point where Trudeau's basically coming out like, well, we're going to have to restrict how much legal immigration we're taking out. Didn't he come out and say something to that effect the other day?
He did, and he also said, our immigration minister basically said, yeah, we also have to reduce the number of temporary foreign workers.
I think that's bullshit. I think they won't do that. But what that illustrates is public perception in Canada, which we consider to be this sort of like pseudo hippie, like fish concert goer, like, hey man, get some flapjacks, eh, and free healthcare for everyone, eh? Like, that's how we look at it in the United States. And even they are getting fed up. I think that even people that, have showed that as a country, they're willing to accept more progressive left-wing policies than on average the United States is. The fact that you have the prime minister coming out that's basically like, whoa, we need to at least paying lip service to halting immigration, I think speaks strongly to the fact that public opinion in Canada is probably, on average, turning against the amount of immigration. Do you think that's fair, that you would say that that's the case?
It's absolutely fair. I think it's so fair that the right now in the polls, if we were to have an election right now, our conservative government would take over 200 seats.
Out of how many? I'm an idiot, so so would that be like? So it'd be like 60 to 70%, something like that.
About 338.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have 338 seats in our house, and basically it would demolish. One of our opposition parties would go into non-party status right now. It is so bad.
Wow.
One of the projected opposition parties is basically what was formerly known as the Separatist Party. I don't think they're really that separatist. It's the Bloc Québécois. Immigration is like destroyed politics almost. Like, I would say that it's destroyed as in like who is voting. But that's not the important bit. I want to talk about like what the effects have been. So we have towns basically in Canada that they're basically now little Indias. They used to be full of just whites or I'm trying to think of what the First Nations, who are the indigenous population, right. You could say. There's like a new word every other year basically, so it's hard to keep track.
If it's cold enough, are they Inuit? Is it?
No,
I don't know.
That is a specific group. They're further north.
Yep.
But they're in the territories there's some in northern Quebec, but basically the territories, we kind of just ignore them. The territories and provinces are different. I'm not going to get into what the difference is, but basically the territories have their own kind of governance. It's basically the same, but it's more autonomous. So
what it's like? Give me some of the worst effects. We got to rush it along a little. I'm not trying to rush you, but like you say, it's destroyed politics. Like, explain.
So I grabbed everything from Reddit. The very far right wing. So, female international students targeted for prostitution by Brampton landlords, says the counselor. So, city councilor. And when you go through this comment section here, I'll link it into Discord here in a minute. It's all saying, yeah, it's quite out in the open. Like, you can find it on subreddits. And when it's pointed out, these are quickly, all from the same group. Brampton is basically Little India now. Yeah. If I go there, I'd be like the only white person, kind of deal. That's hyperbole, but that's another thing. A new route of immigration is through student visas, which on the Canadian government website it says it basically says you make a promise to return home. But now the government's basically said screw that. So tens of thousands of international students who spent years finding a pathway to permanent residency are out of options. Now, why do they care? Why does that matter? In Manitoba recently, they've recently caved into these people who said, yeah, we're going to return, but now they're not. And now they basically were protesting in front of the government. However, in the province of Prince Edward Island, they did not. So now it's causing severely inadequate immigration. Mm-hmm. So, increasing number of Canadians hold negative views on immigration, poll finds. This is an older one. There was a new one out today by Nanos. Nanos is a very reputable polling company in Canada. One second, I'm just going to fix my posture.
Yeah, I hate to do this. Can I give you 2 more minutes? Because I got 3 more callers, and I'm going to give them a 5-minute hard deadline. So,
all right.
I'm so sorry, but...
This is the most... I'll get to the one that's the most egregious.
Okay.
So recently, it's come out through a whistleblower that in Canada, basically companies they can get somebody a temporary foreign workers permit. They get them LMIAs. They get them documentation, basically saying, "Hey, this person's working for this company." So what happens is that the government's basically been rubber stamping these, telling the workers and the government, just ignore any kind of fraud, anything, just rubber stamp it. And it's come out there's been no checks and balances on this, and it's come out in the Star, which is basically come out there's been no checks. So if it's coming out in the left-leaning newspaper, it's basically yeah, this is 100%. And the whistleblower was also on Reddit. So immigration here is just a giant scam. These companies are charging these people $30,000, up to $70,000. I think I've seen up to $100,000. So basically, immigration here is basically this is what you are going to get. This is legal immigration. Yeah. We're not even talking about the illegals or the people who overstay and are
It's similar to in Springfield, where technically the Haitians are legal. They were just flown in under this visa program where they get to stay longer, or considered legal, and then they get all these vouchers. So one of the things you're hearing that's occurring is, let's say you're paying rent at a place and the market sort of set the value of that rent. So Springfield's not a very rich area, so maybe you're renting an apartment for $500 and there's you and your girlfriend and you're paying $500. Well, what they realize is, because the government's giving vouchers to these Haitians, that they could be like, well, shit, we could bump that up to $1,000 per person. And they all got the money because they're getting these vouchers, and we can move 6 Haitians in. So we just went from charging $500 in rent as a landlord to charging $6,000 for the same apartment.
Absolutely.
And so then what happens is, what happens to the native-born population? Well, they're out. They're out in their ass. And it's and so there's been a lot of people at town halls talking about this, look, homeless population's increasing, and there's now a housing crisis because all of these people, the landlords are breaking in money hand over fist. They're happy as shit. They don't give a shit about demographics or possible change to the makeup of the country. All they know about right now is, I went from making $500 a month on that apartment to $6,000 a month. That's all they know. And, it also benefits business owners. Well, you used to have to pay a certain wage. Well, now you don't have to, because you could pay a Haitian a wage to do that that's incredibly lower, and they'll still be able to have a high standard of living because they're getting all these food vouchers and rent vouchers, right? So this is just basically spending money for them. And so maybe you formerly had to pay $25 an hour to entice someone to work that was a native resident of Springfield, Ohio, but now you can pay $12 an hour because it's all extra money to the person because they got all these vouchers. And that's also, like you're saying, legal immigration. And there's so many significant problems that occurred down the road. And I know you've heard me talk about this, but the entire point, people make fun of sort of, I know it's verboten to say the great R theory. Like, I don't think it's based on race. I don't think it's that at all. It would be equally if they brought in a bunch of people that had white skin from Sweden, and those people were overwhelmingly socialist and didn't believe in the concepts of free speech or the Second Amendment. In other words, didn't agree with the values that or the makeup of who we are as a country. It doesn't matter their skin color. It doesn't even matter, like, you know, sort of their cultural preferences to other degrees. What matters is you have, you know, let's say I have I don't know, this picture behind me, right? Let's say that the Thomas Jefferson quote, let's say that was given to me by my grandfather and I cherish it. That's worth more to me than it would be you. Like if I die and someone comes in, I don't have a family, and they take it to Goodwill and you buy it at Goodwill, how much is it worth to you? The $5 you paid, right? But to me it was, you know, you couldn't calculate the value because it was a memory. And so I'm going to treat that in a far better way than someone that doesn't have that attachment. The same's true of your country. The same's true of Canada. These people that are coming in, they don't have the attachment that you have and that other people that were born there. Now, when it comes to traditional forms of immigration, people that are going through sort of legal avenues in a way that it was strenuous, and you're bringing in people that are best for the country, the people you happen to be getting, on average, are people that are coming because they respect and appreciate the values of that country. That's not mass flying in 500,000 Haitians, though. That's not why those people are coming. And illegal immigration, it's the same story. They're coming for benefits. And they don't give a shit about what this country stands for. And they don't give a shit about what Canada stands for. And the people that are running shit are happy about that because the entire idea is to erode national boundaries and national pride. That's the point. So you have a compliant population that will do whatever you say because they don't have the bulwarks of being middle class, they're reliant on the government, and they don't have the appreciation for the values of the country in the first place. So they're malleable. They'll basically do whatever you say. And that's the problem that you see. And that's how you get these massive changes. And the problem is, I'm not saying no immigration ever, though I would put an almost complete halt at this point in the United States because the situation's so dire. But what I'm saying is you can't bring in a population faster than the general population could have them assimilate to them. It's the exact opposite. You have a town of 60,000 people and you bring in 20,000 Haitians that don't even speak the language, that have vast different cultural ideas. You can't survive. It's too much. It changes the landscape of that town, or in this case, that country, too quickly. And there's going to be conflicts, and there's not enough time to organically assimilate with each other. So,
I absolutely agree. Just give me 30 seconds.
Sure.
There's just a couple other things. Like, recently, a literal ISIS terrorist gone to Canada through a student visa. Like, that's kind of how crazy it is. We have something called the Century Initiative, which allows people to, which has been pushing the government, basically has the ear of the government, being like, Canada needs to be 100 million people at all costs. Like, it's absolutely insane. The level of corruption, we could talk for hours.
Yeah.
Just on how bad it is.
Yeah, I'll have to have you call in, and I would definitely like to give you more time. I'm sorry I mismanaged my time tonight. I should have put a limit on 4 callers and then closed the room, but I didn't. So thank you so much, Chrysco. It's always great to talk to you, and hopefully we can talk soon. I'd love to talk more about it.
We can talk about fishing next time.
All
Maybe.
right.
If I go, I haven't gone this year. Have a good night.
You too, man.
I'll be
Thanks.
in comments. But
all right, everyone that I'm bringing in now, I'm getting out of here at 11:50, so we got 4 people left. That's 5 minutes a person. That's 20 minutes. We got to try to keep hard to it. So, Scratch, you're on, man. I know you want to talk about immigration. Give me what you got. 5 minutes. Can you hear me? Scratch, you there? Going once. Going twice. Okay, we're going to move you out. We'll try to get back to you again. Let's go with Lighthouse. What's up, ma'am or sir? 5 minutes? What's happening? Thanks for calling in.
Hey there, Rob. So
how's it going?
It's been going good. How are you?
Doing good.
So what I've been thinking about is the intelligence agencies.
Okay.
They have all these powers, all these resources, all this technology, but people are still able to speak out against them. and I can't dot this I, because if I was an intelligence agency, I would destroy them before they could.
It's the old theory of, do you destroy the well or do you poison the well? The problem is, the tighter you squeeze your fist, the more things squeeze out. So if we had an intelligence agency that was corrupt, let's start with the default position that they're corrupt, right? If they said, therefore, we will not allow anyone to ever utter a word negatively about us, it's impossible, even with the advances of technology, to ever hear every word that everyone's saying. So what happens is it would foment such anger and distrust behind the scenes that inevitably there could be some sort of revolt against that. But if instead what you do is give people the illusion that they have free thought, but you could convince them to all agree with you by control of a narrative, then you're able to actually have more power with less of a threat of ever being overturned. And so traditionally what's happened is that they've relied on the ability of controlling a narrative to convince a plurality of people of what was what. And so even though there could do things that we could see generally, like there's been books written about sort of the problems with color revolutions, the lies of the intelligence agencies, it's pretty much considered, a matter of record at this point how the left civil rights leaders like Malcolm X and Abby Hoffman and MLK, how the FBI was screwing with them. There's accusations of drug running and stuff, but it doesn't matter because there's enough muddying of the water that it was able, if the FBI or the CIA, etc., would have just adopted the premise, no, we'll just censor everyone and throw everyone in jail that disagrees with us, I think they would have had far more success than what they have. Now, I do think that you're seeing an adapt. Mike Benz talks about this a lot. They're now seeing that free speech on the internet is actually a threat to the agendas that they're putting forth, which is why they're advocating so openly for censorship right now. So they're going more back to sort of the strategy that you're talking about. It still won't be total censorship. They'll allow some levels of criticism, but they'll strategically take out the the arguments and the people that they think most likely is to affect negative perception of them is how it will go.
Okay, that makes sense. I've also heard people like Tucker say they can plant evidence onto your computer, something incredibly egregious. I imagine that you can, come up with ideas of what that could be. So last question, do you think people like Charlie Kirk and RFK Jr., who will lambaste the intelligence agencies, can do so from a genuine position besides being, I hate to use the word plant, but besides being a plant?
It's a difficult question. I don't know. What choice do I have? When it comes to supporting someone, or even better question, voting for someone. So take it all the way to Donald Trump, because it is. I have friends that agree with me about the corruption. They're more black-pilled than me. They're like, yeah, and Trump's in on it. Like a guy used to stream with me, SJG Perspective. He firmly believes that. At least he used to. Trump's in on it, right? It's just all an illusion. He's there to make you think, oh, here's the guy fighting for me. But at the end of the day, behind the scenes, really, he's just the controlled opposition that they're going for. But the question is, what's the alternative? You can't become such a nihilist that you're like, well, they control everything, so I can't listen to anything or support anyone because theoretically, if I support them, the argument would go something like this. If they are so nefarious and so powerful, then hypothetically anyone that was ever able to be elected was only done so through their graces. Or anyone that's able to get their narrative out there was only able to do so through their graces. Therefore, that means that one, good people will never be able to break through. And second, if someone does break through, that proves they're not a good person. And I understand that, and that could be true. It absolutely could be true. But I choose to not believe it. And I choose to... Instead, the way I bulwark against that is to say, I never put my trust in any one human being. Maybe my wife, my son, that's it. I don't even trust myself that much, I think that, if you're religious, you put your trust in God. Don't put your trust in a human being like that. So you can have people that you support and that you trust more than others, but always do your best to ensure that you're not blindly following people. So let's say that Charlie Kirk is a plant. Let's say Alex Jones is a plant. Right? But 80% of what Alex Jones is saying is true. It's just the 20% that you're believing that causes you to be passive or to vote in a certain way. That's the shitty stuff. Well, then the best you could do is try to vet the information as it's coming to you. And then the stuff that's good that you could vet that's good, believe. And the stuff that's not, don't believe. Because you don't want to throw out the 80%, I guess. It's a difficult question, though. You're right. How powerful are they? I think that sometimes, although these institutions are very powerful, we should not underestimate their incompetence, because I think they are also very incompetent. And
I like that idea.
They have power for so long, and they've not had people effectively challenging them, that they've become complacent. That's why Trump, in my opinion, won in 2016. They believed their own copium. They believed we got a 99% chance to win. That's why Brexit vote happened. because they're like, fuck it, we control everything. We control the flow of information. We control the BBC. We'll convince people that this is a terrible idea. But it didn't work. So now they've doubled down. And I think that you can see that they're sort of desperate when they're coming out publicly with like, oh, we need to, Hillary Clinton's coming out. We need civil penalties or criminal penalties for people spreading disinformation. To me, that's a sign of weakness on their part, that they're coming out and having to say that. So I don't know. It's a good question. You shouldn't put your blind faith in any politician, or anyone out there that's putting blind faith in me. Look at like Hasbar or that 693 that called in. They'd be like, fuck Rob. Did you hear him saying women should have the right to vote? Like, so don't put your trust in me, man. I think that you should listen to me if you like me, but take with a grain of salt that I could be dumb, I could be wrong, I could theoretically be corruptible. All of that's true. And so you shouldn't put your faith totally in any one person.
Thank you for your time, Rob.
Hey, man, thanks so much. Sorry I didn't have more time for you, but please call back in someday. Really appreciate it. All right. We'll try one more time for Scratch. I know he wants to disagree with me on immigration. I was trying to get him after Chrysco because it sort of dovetailed into it. Scratch, you there?
Okay, I'm back.
5 minutes, roll. You got her.
Holy shit. Gosh, we can talk about Donald Trump's violation of like UN and international law, like surrounding asylum. I think that should be like something.
You can talk about. I'll just tell you real quick. I'm unpersuaded. Don't give a shit.
Oh, you don't care about UN law?
Do not care at all. Not one bit.
Okay. Gosh, fuck.
If UN law is designed, if UN law makes it so that we have to accept anyone who claims asylum, and NGOs are talking to these people and telling them exactly what they need to say so that we're forced to take them because of asylum, I don't give a shit. Fuck the UN. If the UN wants them, they could take them. They're destroying our country. They shouldn't be here. Simple.
That's something I want to talk to you. Like, I was looking after a debate into some of these like NGOs you're talking about. And it less seemed like these NGOs are saying like, oh yeah, I could just go up to the border and say like exactly this, and they'll search and let you in. And then we're like, okay, when you're filing for asylum, like here's some legal support. When you're trying to tell them like, hey, if you're legitimately like going up and you're seeking asylum, like you need to like be specific about like why you're seeking asylum. It didn't seem like they're like, here's how you like purposely suppress the system and get around.
Where are you getting the information of what they're saying? Give me a source.
From the website. I think somebody. Okay, let me try it.
From the NGO's website itself.
Yeah, because somebody in
what
your
do you think they're going to say?
Huh?
What do you think they're going to say? Yeah, we know that these people aren't seeking asylum, and we're telling them exactly how to make sure they get under our asylum laws. You think they're going to say that in their website?
No, obviously not. But that's why then I would ask you, and Ilhan, if you're making the positive claim that, hey, these NGOs are literally like telling these people to subvert the system, I'd ask for a source.
Sure. So I could give you, for example, the tale of Brett Weinstein that went to the Darien Gap and talked to people coming through the Darien Gap. He basically illustrates two groups of people that he sees that are migrating through there. Now, the reason he went there is because he was familiar with it with his scientific work in the past, and he knew that it's a brutal, treacherous gap, and he was wondering why so many people were trying to make this brutal trek. And what he found was there was one group of people that he sympathized with, and what he found was that there were tons of people that were from NGOs that were giving them resources, telling them where they needed to go, things they needed to say. And even some of these people that he were talking to was saying, these people are telling us what we need to do. Then he found a separate group of people, which were basically people that were from the country of China. And he said they were much more secretive and dark, and that they felt very uncomfortable around them. And there were these camps where there seemed to be people that had all these resources that all seemed to be coming from the country of China. And he felt almost menaced by them, that there was something hidden going on. So he specifically talks about the NGOs in the form of that first group, which he absolutely sympathizes with. And he's a lefty, and he sympathizes. And even he is saying in that context that he heard these NGOs. In addition, we could see reporters that have gone down there, such as, I forget the guy's name from Fox, that he's on the ground. I've heard ask hundreds and hundreds of people on camera, what's going on. And they were told, like, we think we could come here because of Joe Biden. Some of them tell them that they were getting help from people that were from non-governmental organizations or from aid organizations that were saying things that they should say. So that's where I'm getting.
Wait. What specifically were like Brett Weinstein? Like what specifically like the group he didn't sympathize with? Like when he says resources, like what kind of resources specifically? Like that's what I need to get at.
Food, shelter, water, things of that nature. And he was also saying that they were talking to them and telling them things that they need to say to get in.
Like, can you give me like a specific example of like what they were saying?
No, I can't. I don't remember.
It's gonna be really hard for me to like take like a fair interpretation.
Let me ask you this: all this aside, how do you define an asylum seeker?
Here, let me go. Give me a sec. Sorry. General terms. Somebody who's fleeing from their home with a well-founded fear of persecution due to race, membership in particular social group, political opinion, religion, or national origin.
Okay, so would you agree that that's different than an economic migrant?
Absolutely. If you're an economic migrant and you're trying to seek asylum, like illegitimately,
Gotcha. So then, would you agree that if you're fleeing because of fear for your life because of your race, that the first country you get to that will not persecute you for that reason would be the country you should seek asylum at?
It really depends.
On what?
Generally, I feel like on what?
Yes.
Like where you are in the world. Like if you're fleeing, and it depends on what you're fleeing. Like a lot of these gangs that people talk about, a lot of them tend to be like multi.
Okay, so you're fleeing a gang. You live in Argentina, or you live in Chile. You're fleeing a gang from South America. You pass through a litany of countries. Your argument is the reason we have to let them into the United States is because every single country that they've passed through, those gangs are inundated with, and they still don't feel safe and feel they'd be persecuted by the same gang that they would be persecuted by in Chile.
Generally, like if you did something particularly bad for their murder, a lot of these countries they don't have the proper legal systems to actually.
Whoa! Say again. If you are accused of murder. And so you flee.
No. If like a certain gang, like a South American country, you really like if they want to kill you, like there's like
they kill you in the United States too. So then we could kick them up to Canada because they'd say, yeah, they can get you here too. Head to Canada.
And right? not as much.
Well, what does that mean? As now we're putting thresholds on it. Now you're saying terms like as much. So you're telling me that a gang in Chile has just as much chance to reach you in Chile as they do in say Mexico?
Not as much, but definitely more than.
Well, then why can't Mexico keep them?
Well, Mexico doesn't. I think at the Mexico doesn't have as much of the infrastructure to keep them.
That's true. So that economic livelihoods of those people that are seeking asylum wouldn't be as good. Now, what do you call someone who's no longer seeking asylum because they're in a place where they no longer fear for their safety, but whose economic fortunes would be better if they kept going north? What would you call those people?
I would call those people who reasonably want to live like a decent life.
I would call them economic. Yes, another word for that's economic migrant.
I would definitely not call them economic migrants.
All right, man. That's you get the final word, but I gotta go. That's 5 minutes.
All right, Rob. Obviously, being in Mexico is probably way easier for gangs to get to you than being in the fucking United States.
Okay. All right, man. Thanks. Sorry I didn't have more time. You could obviously call back in. We could talk more, but I gotta get rolling tonight. Man. So thanks, man. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, take it easy.
Bye.
All right. We got Commander Crazy Eyes, and then Emmett will be the last person. So, Commander Crazy Eyes, you there? Hello.
Hey, what's up, Rob?
Not much. I only got like 5 minutes, so I apologize for that. But thanks so much for calling in.
Yeah, no problem. So I just want to touch on a couple of things. Okay. No pun intended, but I do agree with what you said about the making culturally sex positions, maybe even time that to voting. I think only people who do missionary should be able to vote. But anyway,
come on, you're going to kill Mark Robinson running for governor there in North Carolina.
But yeah, anyway, so I don't know. I just, I guess I have a slightly different point of view from Andrew, and Jim Bob and them. I think that people like to tie, especially on the Repeal the 19th crowd, like to tie everything to drafting, right? Like you can be drafted, therefore, because it is the strongest argument.
Sure.
I actually don't know if that is the best thing. That if we were going to, so I recognize right now, we're not going to be changing universal suffrage anytime soon. Mm-hmm. That's just, it's in vogue. That's just the way it is. I'm not we can barely keep our border closed, much less we're going to change the electorate, right? So, but I would say if I were to argue in the longer term, I don't think it should be tied to drafting. I don't even necessarily know if, I don't know if we can get away with this. I don't even know if we should have a draft per se, but I do like the Starship Troopers kind of idea, and I think that it's a little bit more. It has a better balance of incentives. So the idea in Starship Troopers, just really quick, I won't rant because I only got 5 minutes, but is that you have to serve the Federation in some regard. It can be the military, so you can go out and pew pew, right? Or it can be they need somebody to do hard labor, or they need somebody for weapons training, right, and like experimentation or whatever, right? The point is that they're going to make your life suck for 2 to 4 years, and it's going to suck so much. You're going to sacrifice like some, a chunk of your life that you are going to know that your vote counts for something, and you earned it. It's not just something that you were given freely. And the other key is you can't vote while you're in service. So there isn't an incentive to, okay, people who are currently in the military just become a junta or something, right? So I would say the issue of universal suffrage is like super old. And the problem is, and I forgot which founding father it was that said it, but basically the second that the electorate, a universal kind of franchise, realizes they can vote itself money from basically rich people, then your entire system is screwed because the entire incentive structure is just completely fucked at that point.
I don't so first off, to me, I'm more amicable to arguments saying that there's some meritocratic reason that you have to achieve something before you could vote than saying that you shouldn't be allowed to vote for immutable characteristics. One of those arguments is familiarly public service, military service or public service. And Starship Troopers talks about this. Was the book, someone says it was a critique of fascism. Wasn't. The movie was. No. Was the book? I think the book is sort of glorifying that idea. I could be wrong.
It is.
But I haven't read the book, but I've seen people critically reviewing the book that seem to suggest it gets a bad rap, like, oh, this is a critique of, quote, fascism, but not really. It's actually the author was trying to say that people need to have skin in the game. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not dying on this hill. But it's an interesting argument. I don't know that I agree with that argument in totality, but do I think that there should be some sort of earning of a vote? I do. I think that the limit I put on it is you should have to vote in person on the day of the vote. That at least takes out what I call the disinterested voter, the voter that's just sitting at home and someone says, hey man, fill that out real quick and I'll take it in. If you can't even find the energy to care enough to show up to the day of the vote and vote, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. I think that takes out a lot of the problem of people, not that aren't voting like me or voting for the other side of me, but people that just literally have no clue or no energy to try to do the base work of finding out. Now, that doesn't solve all the problem. There'll still be people that show up election day that haven't looked into it, etc., but it solves part of it. But in general, there are other things. People say only landowners should vote, or how about only people with children should vote, because they're the only ones that truly care about the future of the country. All of these things are interesting, and I do agree with the criticism that universal franchise oftentimes can spiral out of control. That's certainly a problem with domestic democracy. If 51% of people vote to enslave the other 49, what are you going to do? So the idea is that a republic's supposed to be, the idea that we're a representative democracy, a republic, is supposed to be some sort of bulwark against that. But if it fails, it certainly could potentially fail. You can see that, and in many ways it has failed. Is there a way that we could sort of switch to something else? I'm open to hearing this stuff. It's a long conversation of the ins and outs. I would walk through it with anyone that wants to talk about it. But suffice it to say, I think that we need to be pragmatic, and I don't know how we're anywhere near close to achieving any of that. I don't know how you're going to convince people to vote themselves into not voting. It's just such a tough sell. And so how would it potentially look? Like, which party is going to run on, look, only people that do public service or involved in the military should be allowed to vote? Who's going to win with that argument? We can't even get politicians to win with the argument like, dude, maybe we need to cut social spending some. That's a death knell. Any politician that wants to correctly talk about the failures of Social Security, which is failing, which is going bankrupt, are guaranteed to lose, because everyone that collects Social Security is like, nah, fuck that. Don't touch my Social Security.
That's why Trump doesn't do that.
Right.
Because he wants to win.
That's absolutely right.
So just like a quick thing, you're absolutely right. So the book was actually written fairly earnestly, and it actually was the book. So the book was basically an outline of Heinlein trying to take the Roman Republic model into kind of a futuristic setting. So like in the movie, it says he said the professor says, what do you think? They're talking about violence, right, and political violence, and they said, what would the leaders of Hiroshima say that violence doesn't solve anything? In the book, it's actually Carthage, directly kind of tying that. And the idea was that Heinlein was trying to put forward was that it wasn't just it's that in the Roman Republican model is that if you went off to fight the battles, you were basically sacrificing for res publica. So republic comes from basically the public business is in Latin. And so that's basically the idea is it's not just that like you're smart enough or you own land and you pay taxes. It's like the idea that you're willing to basically die or sacrifice your entire life. And therefore we know we can trust that you at least have some sort of public mindedness instead of purely private mindedness. One thing I will say, because I'm with you, I'm like, it's all fun to political theorize, like in your head, but I think one thing that is a cultural thing, so there's not like a hard policy, is that we used to have more respect, I think, culturally for military leaders. So if you look at a lot of our presidents, not maybe even not a majority, but a lot of them were in the military. They were generals, they were captains, they were people that you basically went out and kind of kicked ass in the name of America, and then they came back to civil life, right? I think that, and we do have this still, because I remember when Mattis was
I hate to do this, but I gotta give you like 20 more seconds. I'm so sorry.
Okay, no problem, I know. But yeah, it's like when General Mattis from the Marines was put in the Trump administration, there was a lot of people that were questioning about Trump that I personally knew. They went, you know what? Okay, if Mattis is in that role, then I'll have more faith because he is, a longtime general and he was like a soldier and everything, right? He was infantry. I think that focusing on trying to maybe promote in the Republican Party is these not just whoever says the right things and is like, I'm mega populist, but maybe trying to gear more towards ex-military people.
The problem is our military's corrupt, woke, and Mattis fucking sucked. Mattis was out Mattis, for example, was heavily critical, went outside his scope as general and like broke sort of protocol and norm to come out and criticize Trump for even suggesting things like the National Guard being used to stop rioting in the name of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. So fuck General Mattis. Like, am I supposed to, if General Miley runs as a Republican, am I supposed to respect him? They're fucking corrupt. Yes, there was a time when our military leaders were sacrificing and were men's men, and now they're fucking part of a woke institution that was intentionally kicking people out because they wouldn't take a vaccine. So fuck them. I don't have any respect by default for someone just because they were in a brass position in the military. Now, is it true that I have immense respect for the people that signed up and served, even if I disagree with them? Absolutely. But I get what you're saying, though. When we had a system where we respected heavily the people that actually made sacrifices, so be it. One of my favorite pictures is a picture of Eisenhower with his medals, and it's just like one little row, and then the picture of Miley, who's never won a war, with like medals that like go the whole way down his chest. That to me sums it up. But I gotta let you go. Thank you so much.
Hey, wait, Rob. One more question. If Sergeant Johnson from Halo were to run for president, would you vote for him?
I've played Halo, like Halo 2 was the only one I ever played, so I don't know who Sergeant Johnson is. I apologize. Right. But probably. Or maybe not. Maybe that's going to be clipping people like, Rob said he'd vote for Sergeant Johnson. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Take it easy. Have a good one. All right, well, real quick, I want to read a few super chats just so I don't forget. Randy West and David Atlas, thank you so much for becoming members on YouTube. I really appreciate it. Roar89 for $5. Just had to drop a little love. Good luck with your back issue. Man, that's always a bummer. Thank you. The real Jam Chico for $5 says, the current widespread illegal immigration problem is a Cloward Piven strategy. Thoughts? Yeah, I do think it's designed to overwhelm our resources, which then makes us more disparate, which is more likely to vote in the party of authoritarian to solve the problem that they themselves has created. I agree with that. Last caller we got here. Let's go with Emmett. Emmett, can you hear me?
Hello, Rob.
Hey, save the best for last. We got like 5 minutes. So what's happening? What's on your mind?
Nah, I can wait for next week. You just go ahead, have a great time with your wife.
You sure?
Yeah, you can just... I can scream at you another time. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Now, listen, I do want to say that next Thursday won't be in a call-in show. Maybe we'll do it Friday instead. But I think that I have a thing in real life coming up next Thursday. So, but we'll get to it. We'll do a call-in show next week for sure.
Yeah, no worries. Just have a good time.
But just curious, what was the topic you're going to yell at me about?
Well, I already yelled at chat, and you kind of addressed it. It was me talking about the Trump debate.
Okay.
I disagree with him losing. I think he did. I don't think he did the best, but I think like we all wanted him to not to beat to a pulp. Like if it was a dead corpse again, and that was not going to happen. So
okay,
I
we could definitely talk about it next week. I don't mind at all.
Yeah. So yeah, just have a great time.
Thank you.
If we can do it next time, it's okay.
I'll write you down to
internet
get you in first. I will try to do that. Hopefully I remember. And remind me in the chat. What's your name in the chat, just so I know? It might be different than Emmett.
Yeah, it's Adukar. You know me.
What is it?
Adukar.
Oh!
Oak.
Oh, yeah, shit. That's why you're saying, yeah, I see you typing in the chat right now, but I didn't recognize because your Discord name is different that was, I'm so sorry. I didn't recognize that was, but, all right, man.
I was also the one that called in, the first caller in the debate, yeah.
Yeah, so I will write that down. So we'll get to you first next time. Thanks, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, have a great time. Bye-bye.
I will. Thank you. All right, one last thing. So those of you that are watching now, I will re-show this. So I did go get my MRI results. I go to an orthopedic person tomorrow, but I did go to a chiropractor today who showed me my results, and so I will show those to you. Maybe. There we go. As I did at the beginning of the show, just so people don't say I'm lying about my back problems. Okay. There we go. And you can see I have 2 herniated discs here, and it's these. If you're obviously the 2 big ones at the bottom there, and that you see that black, that's my disc that's bulging out, and then the white that it's bulging into is my spinal cord. Now what this all means is it hurts like hell. It sucks a lot. So that's when I've been pissing and moaning the past 5 months. Even now I'm in fucking, it hurts really bad. It hurts really bad right now. So I'm trying to keep my shit together. I really am. But that's what's going on. Now, having said that, if that's the biggest problem in my life, things are going pretty damn good, which they are. I got a fantastic wife, a fantastic son. Feel pretty healthy other than that, so fuck it. It was like a work thing. Basically, a person was falling down at work, and I twisted in a weird way. The person happened to be pretty heavy. They were falling downstairs, and I grabbed them, and I think that's how it happened, but I don't know. That's when I noticed, like, a week or 2 later that it was hurting. Looks like I have a tapeworm. Is that what it looks like? No. Maybe I do have it. I don't know. But, so it's been about 5 to 6 months. It fucking sucks. So, I owe someone a tub of their favorite ice cream. It's probably true. My son today, I got a small ice cream with sprinkles, and he got a baby cone. And he looks at me. He goes, "Let's play the Switch game." And he grabbed my ice cream that was small with sprinkles and gave me his baby cone. So my son learned the Switch game today, where he took. No, I haven't taken any. I take a leave only. I have not taken any painkillers. They did give me muscle relaxers, which I've taken once or twice. I don't like them. I'm doing all I can to avoid painkillers, and I'm doing all I can to avoid surgery. So I take a leave, sometimes Advil. That's what I've been on. So it's good enough when I'm laying down. It doesn't hurt, so I can at least sleep at night. But yeah, I'm really, really, really trying to avoid painkillers and surgery. So anyways, tomorrow morning, I have an appointment with an orthopedic person. So we're going to try to get a plan of attack. Best things we could do to sort of fix this as best as possible. Tomorrow evening, I will be streaming with potentially Criminal, who is a lawyer, who's a lot of fun. I think he'll be someone who tends to agree with me. We're going to talk about sort of topics related to sort of the criminal cases around Trump, his chances to win, maybe some other scandals that are going on around the Democratic Party. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. That's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern. So, yeah, it should be good. I'm going to keep doing these call-in shows. Listen, I know I got a little heated with 693 or whatever. I don't give a shit. We're men. We could deal with it. I know a lot of you disagree with me on this fucking women's right to vote shit. And I assure you it bums the shit out of me. It really does. Because I'm pretty adamant that I think women should have the right to vote. And I think it's a huge blunder to be publicly talking about this stuff. But I respect my audience, and I respect those people that disagree, and I'm willing to talk, particularly on the call-in shows, about what people want to talk about. And I understand there are other criticisms. If I'm talking about blunders, should I just be adapting the position that I think Trump won the debate and talking about it exclusively? No, I think there's different levels of it. But I do take that maybe for the next 2 months, I should be focused on pushing forth issues that I think that will help Trump win. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So you're not going to hear me talking a lot about the debates, except when people call in and say, I want to talk about the debate. I think you're wrong. I think Trump lost, or Trump won, and I think you're wrong. Then I will give them the courtesy of talking to them about that. But other than that, and I think I've illustrated that last Friday's panel debate, the shows that I've done this week at work, the mobile shows, and the show that I did here last night. I hope that the message that I'm hammering home is the dangers of the establishment, of the Harris campaign, and why we should prefer to vote for Donald Trump. So I hope that that's coming forward, and I hope that it's coming forward particularly to people that maybe aren't sure how to vote or maybe weren't convinced that it's important to go out to vote. I'm really going to be putting forth an effort on my channel and in real life to try to get people out to the ballot boxes for Donald Trump. And as much as I dislike the Republican Party many, many times, predominantly to vote for Republicans with few exceptions of specific people that may suck. So that's my plan of attack going forward. And, you know, I hope that that comes across. We will raid someone on Twitch, and then I'll get out of your hair for tonight. Let's do that. Someday I'll figure out how to raid people on YouTube. Andrew Wilson told me he'd talk me through it, and then I never got around to it.
Tries to get.
Never got around to it. Oh, who's on? There's Ranger and Rogue. Let's raid him. Of course, vote for Trump. So, all right, guys, you're the best. Oh, super chat, the real Jamicho. Thanks so much. $5. Teaches a tight sales pitch to sell Trump to reasonable undecideds with unreasonable bias. The country is better off under Donald Trump than it was a Harris-Biden administration. They lied and covered up the mental failings of Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris would do the same. It's ran by shadowy people that you don't know that will take away your right to free speech and will increasingly open the borders and harm you economically so their rich friends could get better. Were you better off under Donald Trump for the majority of his term than Kamala Harris? Yes. That's the sales pitch. So, all right, everyone, thank you so much. We'll talk to you all soon. As always, have a good one.